Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei was the son of Loki and grandson of Hades Part 2. Before we start, please go support Linkrobel13 for writing that awesome fanfic. Now let's begin. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Issei is a male in this story. Chapter 18. Serziches looked at his mother and father in front of his not-so-dear brother-in-law's parents, remembering what happened a couple of hours ago. Flashback. This is neither the time nor the place to discuss this, said the brown-haired boy, only for his mother to step forward. Let's talk at my house, said the chestnut's mother with a smile. Issei did not look comfortable with the proposal his mother had given to his not very beloved mother-in-law. Serziches soon arrived, accompanied by his father and his beloved wife Grafia. Oh, I see that your husband and your eldest son are also here. Come, I invite you to talk at the house, said the brunette, but her son protested. No mother, this is a pretty bad idea. He didn't finish speaking because his mother looked at him firmly, silencing him. Ahaha, they shut you up, son. You. The black-haired man was knocked to the ground due to the blow to the head given to him by his wife. End of flashback. Serziches managed to contain a laugh at that last thing, however the situation in front of him was something that worried him, since as his wife had told him the security of this generation was not the least bit weak. He knew this because Azazel himself told him that it did not matter if he decapitated Kakabiel or not. He was almost dead, and the young man, as he saw him, still looked like he had enough energy to fight. Then Alana was sitting on a chair drinking tea next to her husband Zeoticus. In front of them a brown-haired woman with hazel eyes and a black-haired man looked at them seriously. Then Alana, we know that they are demons, and above all we know that our son is the security, said the brunette to the dismay of the couple. Who are you? Zeoticus said without further ado, quite seriously. Lokla, Celtic and Nordic wizard, also a part-time joker, the black-haired man said playfully to the annoyance of the red-haired man. Hi do Miki, experienced magician in Greek magical arts and Western magic, the brunette said without further ado. I see a family of wizards, but I still can't understand how their son is so strong. Zeoticus said seriously. Spartan training, several fights with supernatural beings since childhood and intensive studies on magic and martial arts. He had everything of me, including in our fights, said Loki seriously, including my jokes. Haha, he laughed thunderously, only to be sent into the wall by a right hook from his wife, or so they thought when they saw how he vanished to enter the room. That was unnecessary, Miki. He said in a bored tone. I already knew it was an illusion, Loki. On the other hand, let's talk bluntly. What do you want, Venezuelan? Miki said, looking at the brunette demon in front of her. Back to my daughter, she said seriously. You realize that you could take on the entire underworld if necessary, she said in a harsh tone, but she gulped as she saw the brown-haired boy emanate a truly dark aura staring at her, as if he were reaching the most hidden parts of her soul, pitting her against her most fearsome nightmares. I've heard that your son is among the 10 strongest, but let me tell you something, I'm not afraid one bit of the weak forces of the demons. In fact, you would need to ally yourself with the fallen angels in heaven if you even want to have a minimal chance of seriously facing me, demon of the Baal clan. If there is a reason why you and your husband are alive, it is because you are the parents of one of the 2 women he loved the most, said the brunette harshly, while a scarlet aura and jade eyes were present. Let me remind you that you are in front of the most powerful security in history, the true red dragon of domination. After saying that, the room had darkened and behind the brunette you could see the presence of the Welsh dragon himself. Then Alana was sweating profusely. She really felt like she wouldn't be able to get out of that place alive. Who the hell was this guy? Or rather, what was that entity in front of her? She felt as if she were facing certain death and that the only thing stopping her was precisely her daughter, who took the brown-haired boy's hand. Don't let his words affect you, Ice, she said with concern, looking him straight in the eyes. I can't stand being treated like an object. You are my light in all this immense darkness. I love you, said the brown-haired boy without further ado, as he took her by the chin and kissed her without further ado. Riaz forgot for a moment where she was, and without further ado, she let herself be carried away by the kiss, although of course a couple of them didn't like that in the least. Riaz. Get away from that human now, said Benalana in a serious and reproachful tone. You are a Grimoire, Riaz, do not dirty the honor of the Fa. He did not finish speaking because Issei's foot fell on his mouth, with such force he bled, looking angrily at the brown-haired boy. She's a Hyoudou, not a Grimoire. Did you forget that she already left her clan? The brown-haired boy said seriously. Ice is right, I am already a renegade devil since I left the underworld and the demon faction, she said seriously, just to show that her magic circles no longer showed the Grimoire family emblem. Riaz, do you realize what that means? You will be hunted. Like she fell down upon seeing the brunette's piercing gaze. Let them try, said the brown-haired boy as he went to see the redeed. Riaz, just stay by my side, I'll protect you, said the brown-haired boy as he took her cheek, blushing her. Hi, the redeed said in a loving tone, again forgetting where they were as a pink aura surrounded them. What a shit, but not as much as the clay figure he made in his class, haha, laughed Loki, while Miki looked at him badly, only to burst out laughing. What do you mean by that? Vanillana said as Zeoticus wiped his nose of the blood. Do you want to see it? He said, showing a video camera. Oh, I see, we had the same idea, said the Redeed, smiling a little. You know, I have some mead stored in my study, what do you say, a drink? The black-haired man invited. With pleasure, said the Redeed, forgetting everything before as if nothing had happened. Men, although on the other hand a mead would be good for me, do you want some? Miki said, looking at Vanillana. Mead, isn't that a Nordic drink? Well, I've never tried it, so I accept your offer, said the brunette, leaving the room, leaving the couple in their reverie. Issei-san, Ria-san, I made lemon cake, do you want some? A certain blonde said shyly, only to see the couple looking at her expectantly. Lemon cake, the chestnut shouted excitedly. The blonde laughed a little with the Redeed, and without further ado they left the room. Ice-chan didn't invite me, Hestia said in a sad corner. I feel like rather than ignoring us, they didn't even notice we were here, Hella said, still holding the pennants with Issei's name on them. They both saw the silver-haired maid and the other Redeed in the room. Let's go get cake, Hestia said, smiling at the nervous look of the pair. We'll catch up with them in a moment, said the Redeed, smiling somewhat nervously. Okay, he said, happily leaving the room with Hella. Once alone, the two looked at each other, and the Redeed did not hesitate to say it. She is Hestia, the Greek goddess of the home. What is she doing here? Perhaps he opened his eyes in realization. The other one was Hella. They didn't even change their appearance to disguise it. Surziches, that's what it means, she said fearfully. That man is the Norse god of lies, Loki, said the Redeed. I'm surprised by your deduction, said a voice behind both of them, who were scared to see the black-haired man behind them. What are you trying to do, Loki? Surziches said seriously. Living a happy life with my children and my beloved wife, and getting your father drunk. Do you want to come for some drinks? Said the black-haired man, smiling. Who is really your wife? Graphia said with doubt and some fear. Oh, you'll know that at the faction meeting in a few days. Graphia Lucifujo, I should say Graphia Lucifer, said the black-haired man seriously and with a mocking smile, disappearing from the room, leaving the couple perplexed and at the same time fearful. In another room, Issei was seen pulling one side of the cake, while Hestia pulled the other in an intense battle over who would eat that lemon cake. Chapter 19. Fenrir could be seen growling loudly towards a long white-haired man with a long white beard wearing golden armor as he stared with his single eye at the brown-haired youth in front of him. Who stopped Ragnarok? It was incomprehensible what he said except for the last thing, and after that he pierced Issei's chest, while Fenrir screamed his name in anger and blood ran from his chest. Issei got up from his bed sweating profusely. What is this, he thought as his body trembled. This was the second time he dreamed about this, and he still didn't understand what it all meant. He heard a moan beside him and saw Asia clinging to his left arm despite having gotten up, then he felt Ria's beside him getting up and looking at him sleepily with a smile. Good morning, Ice, she said in a clumsy tone before forcing Issei to lie down. 5 more minutes, better 10, she said in a sleepy tone, before lying down next to his chest and sleeping again. Asia simply searched for her beloved's body again, however she quickly got up and ran out of the room to the brown-haired boy's dismay. In the distance he could hear her, apparently she had vomited. Did dinner upset her? Well, eating cake isn't very healthy if you think about it, he thought, but then he felt heartburn and slightly dizzy. Without further ado, he left the room, leaving a real illusion of him sleeping, so that the Redeed would not wake up, and he walked towards the bathroom in search of his beloved, only to bump into Venezuelan on the way, who was helping the young blonde to vomit. Issei was about to speak when his father and mother approached the place. Apparently Asia had woken everyone up including Ria's, who went directly to the young blonde side. Asia-chan, are you okay? The young brown-haired boy asked worriedly. Hi, said the blonde before almost falling to the ground, being held by the Redeed and her mother, despite the annoyance the Redeed felt for having her mother in her fiancé's house. Sorry, I woke up dizzy and nauseous, said the blonde. Come on, are you pregnant? Loki said playfully, only to see his wife stand in front of him with a smile. That's right, it's a baby, said the brunette smiling happily. Hey, you're pregnant again, Miki, said the black-haired boy, dismayed. No, it's Asia-chan's baby and our irresponsible son, she said sweetly. Then a loud bang was heard. Issei-san, said the blonde when she saw how the younger brown-haired boy had fainted. Who? Loki whispered into his son's ear despite being unconscious. You never change, said Miki, laughing a little at her husband's jokes. Wait. I'm going to be a grandmother, the brunette screamed loudly when she realized this. Asia for her part was extremely happy, while Ria's rubbed her belly tenderly. Asia-chan, you're going to be a mom, said the Redeed with a blush and a lot of happiness. Only you are missing Ria's-chan, said the blonde, very happy. We will be a great family, said the blonde, touching her belly with love. Ria's parents didn't know what to think of this, but it was clear that this was unexpected even for them. When is the wedding? Serziches asked next to his wife as she arrived in red pajamas. In a few days, Hella said excitedly. In a few days Asia-chan and Ice-chan are getting married. How happy, Hestia said as she hugged Asia and Riaz with happiness, but then looked at Riaz with excitement. We still have to plan your wedding with Ice-chan, she said, causing the retreat to blush. With that, Loki picked up his son like a sack of potatoes and left, remembering that the poor boy had to go to the academy. Later that same day, Riaz and her entourage were in front of a door which was sealed. Issei looked expectantly at what was about to happen, because his fiancée had sent him to speak to come for something important. My bishop is sealed here. I've realized that it's not really necessary to keep him locked up here, so I'm going to release him, said the retreat. Is it really dangerous? Or what was the reason for sealing it? The brown-haired boy asked curiously. It's because of her sacred gear, she can't control it and it usually causes some problems. She was considered dangerous, but her user well, it's better for you to see it, said Akeno looking at the door seriously. I see, said the brown-haired boy seriously, preparing himself for what was to come. Riaz removed the seal with one hand, but a powerful scream was heard in the room, and it was quite a feminine one. Issei arched his eyebrow at this. Did Riaz have almost only women in her entourage? Hell, even Kiba was effeminate. They would have to go out among friends to help the poor devil. Surely Mitsuda and Motohama would agree if a bachelor party would be good for him. Behind the door was a coffin which was closed and was shaking. Why did you remove the seal? Someone's voice was heard coming from the vampire. The brown-haired boy said in disbelief. Asper, it's time for you to get out of there. You won't have to be sealed ever again, Riaz said, smiling and opening the coffin. No. I'm terrified of being outside, said the person inside, who turned out to be a rather effeminate blonde man dressed in a female school uniform. Wow, I was almost fooled by your clothes and appearance. You know there are people who do the same thing as you on the internet, said the brown-haired boy, uncomfortable but smiling mockingly. Who is he? There are more people I don't know. I'm scared, said Gasper fearfully. Gasper is a crybaby, Kaneko said harshly. Why, a Kaneko is being cruel to me, Gasper shrieked as he closed the coffin. Issei laughed mockingly at the situation with Akeno. Hey kid, Issei said as he put on an evil smile. There's some garlic in there, he said maliciously. It's a lie, you say that, so I'll get out, Gasper shouted from inside. Riaz looked at Issei, shaking her head at what the brown-haired boy was trying to do, but sighed as she saw the evil smile grow bigger. So what was on your mind, I asked myself, the brown-haired boy said playfully, only to see the lid move a little and… garlic, Gasper shouted at the top of his lungs to the chestnut's thunderous laughter, but then he noticed that no one in the room seemed to react. Did time stop? I see forbidden Baylor view now, he said, touching his chin to walk towards Kiba. What are you doing? Why doesn't my power affect you? Gasper said fearfully. The demigod and the Sekiryu. On the other hand, I want to play a joke on Kiba, said the brown-haired boy, and then put a finger of the blonde inside the nose of the same to go on to put the bag of candy of Kaneko on the same head. You have a cool power, you know. Stopping time is a very useful ability. You're afraid of your power, right? The brown-haired boy said, then crouched down to the little blonde's height and put a hand on his head. I always wanted a little brother, so don't worry, from now on I'll take care of you along with Riaz and the others. If you're afraid of your power, I'll teach you how to use it and master it. It's a promise between brothers. What do you say? The brown-haired boy said, smiling at him so that the little damper hugged him with tears. He said, crying, and then time went back and the brown-haired boy stood up and looked at Kiba. Kiba, no, that's for very dirty people, said the brown-haired boy somewhat seriously, so that the blonde blushed in embarrassment, while Kaneko looked at him badly, only to stifle a laugh at what she saw, since Kaneko had her bag of candy on her head and was looking around looking for it. I see, said Riaz, staring at him with an accusatory look. Asper did it, I had nothing to do with it, said the brown-haired boy, pointing at the damper as he looked at him indignantly. Yeah, and I'm an angel, she said sarcastically. Then the brown-haired boy looks at her seriously. Okay, I admit it, I did it, do you hear me, I did it. Then dramatically he kneels down in front of her and grabs her clothes while looking at her with concern. What would you do with me? He said dramatically before everyone's incredulous gaze. Is this the end of the Sekiryu? This is what Drake meant when he said that the fate of the Sekiryu is always tragic, he said, overacting everything. So much drama, Akeno said, laughing, watching as Kaneko continued looking for her sweets everywhere. Ice, give Kaneko her sweets, said Riaz, while the white-haired girl looked at him indignantly. How am I going to give her something that she already has with her? The brown-haired boy said mockingly. You have them in your head, Kaneko, the brown-haired boy said, staring at her, and she took them off his head. Whatever. Bye. He stuck out his tongue in a funny way and vanished. This Issei is so, Riaz said resignedly. Hey, what about Akeno? Kiba said, looking where Akeno was before. Ice, Riaz said, sighing in defeat as the damper had a drop of sweat running down the back of his neck and wondered what the hell was going on in the head of his recent older brother figure. Underworld Elysian Fields. The Kendo was shocked, a moment ago she was in the old academy building, and now she was in the Elysian Fields. Akeno-senpai, said the brown-haired boy behind her to point out a place in the distance that looked like a small kiosk surrounded by flowers and many things, and there was a brown-haired girl picking flowers and next to her. Mom Akeno ran with all she could to where her mother was. Upon hearing that, she turned to the brunette woman who looked about 40 years old, who smiled at her happily. When the pair of black-haired girls arrived, they hugged each other as the youngest one cried while the brunette grabbed Issei's cheeks. "My dear grandson, tell me, how have you been? Have you eaten yet?" Hanabira Hyoudou asked. "Yes grandma, I already ate haha, and there is a lot to tell you. Where do I start?" he said excitedly, but his grandmother began to pull his ears while frowning. "I already found out that you made me a great-grandmother, you little rascal," she said while pulling his ears in front of the two black-haired girls. The eldest turned to look at her daughter severely. "I hope it's not about you," Akeno said Shuri, but when she noticed the immediate blush they both had and the way they both began to deny it, she found it funny. Maybe it could annoy the couple. Issei, a loud and commanding voice was heard as a black-haired man in black armor walked directly to the brunette accompanied by several specters. Shuri Himejima's throat dried up as in front of her was the ruler of the underworld. She did not know what to do as she was afraid that he would do something to her daughter, since she was someone living in the world of the dead. Worse yet, her daughter was a hybrid half-fallen angel and half-demon. It was well known the hatred that Hades had for those two races in particular, so she tried to speak but was speechless when she saw the ruler of the underworld hug the young brunette. "My dear grandson, I already found out that you made me a great-grandfather, you are my pride, come on, let's go get your first drink," said the ruler of the underworld to the brown-haired boy before the astonished gaze of Shuri Himejima, but then he remembered a small but very important detail. "You are Hades' wife." Shuri pointed at Hanabira who nodded with a smile. Chapter 20. Guo Academy, 11:30 p.m. Outside the academy, a huge barrier isolated it from the human world. Inside it in the sky there were angels with their armor and weapons of light prepared. Elsewhere, just to the south, were the fallen angels with their weapons of light. To the west were the demons who had magic circles prepared and their weapons ready. On the northern flank were the specters of Hades commanded by Rhadamanthys. At the center of it all were the Golden Knights of Athena, who looked at the four flanks seriously, and on the ground below them were the Bronze Knights. "This gives me a bad feeling," said the brown-haired boy in his Pegasus armor. One of the Golden Knights looked at him and said, "Don't worry kid, in the worst case we will stop them while you get Athenia out of here," said the light blue-haired man. "Anyway, do your job well, Albafica," said the Taurus Knight. Student Council Room. Azazel looked up at the arrival of the amber-eyed brown-haired boy who was accompanied by a blonde with emerald eyes that he instantly recognized. Michael frowned as he saw the noble and kind-hearted ex-nun next to the unknown Securitate, and even more so when he saw that next to him was the princess of the Crimson Ruin, escorted by her entire entourage and her mother-in-law Miki Hyoudou. Surziches looked sad for at least a few seconds when he saw the annoyed look his sister gave him when she saw him in the room. Hades, despite being in his skeletal form, smiled as he saw them arrive. "Well, with them we would be all the people needed for this meeting, can we start?" Athenia said, hiding her happiness at seeing the young brown-haired boy, but especially at the blonde who had a slightly swollen belly. "Well, first of all I must clarify that Kakabiel betrayed our faction by killing several fallen angels and seriously injuring Barakiel," the aforementioned nodded, showing a scar on his shoulder. Azazel looked at the former nun with a smile. "If it weren't for your assistance Barakiel, well, it goes without saying," he said, only to see Barakiel, who smiled gratefully at the nun who blushed at being the center of attention. Riaz and Issei saw Asia. "She is beautiful," they both said, smiling at the girl who blushed more. Michael looked at her and then spoke up. "I understand that you were in Hades, more precisely, in the Elysian Fields. My question is, what were you doing there, Hades?" the leader of heaven mentioned while the pair of exorcists looked on expectantly. Persephone looked at him directly. "Can't a mother care about the well-being of her own daughter?" said the goddess of spring to the shock of those present. "Impossible, she's human," Azazel himself said incredulously, but then he opened his eyes in shock. "Don't tell me that he left the question hanging in the air before Persephone's assent." "That's right, I used a human avatar and created her from his flesh and blood. That she was born with twilit healing was no coincidence," she said with a motherly smile to the blonde who smiled happily. Then Azazel pointed at Issei. "He is engaged to her because of what makes you the mother-in-law of the Securitate. That explains her connection to Hades," he said in a calmer tone, although when he saw the blonde's slightly bulging belly he smiled. "And I see that he didn't waste his time," the fallen angel said playfully. Riaz for her part gave her older brother a threatening look which was very clear, "Don't say a word about Issei." Then Hades spoke up. "Well, getting back to the matter at hand, you've decided you'll be at peace," or his eye sockets glowed red and threateningly. "By the way, what guarantees us that you're not planning something?" Azazel demanded in a harsh tone. Tell me one thing that I've done to humans. Why, as far as I remember, he pointed at Surziches, thousands of humans killed by renegade demons. He went on to point at Michael, thousands of humans killed by renegade exorcists like Valper Galilei or Friedzelsen. From there he went on to point at Azazel, millions of humans killed by sacred gear extraction in the last decade and another thousands killed by fallen angels just for fun, he said in a harsher tone. Now you tell me, how do you justify those deaths? How are you going to face those souls that came before me crying out for justice? Were the children of the Sacred Sword Project or the victims of the Inquisition deaths of the deceased biblical god? He mentioned very seriously, it's been 2 millennia receiving souls, one after another, victims of their factions, and most of them are humans. Michael, your father would be disappointed at that. I hated him like you can't imagine, but while he was alive, he never left such an act unpunished, and that was why the previous great biblical war took place. He looked at Azazel harshly for your immaturity, then he looked at Surziches, and the stupidity of your predecessor. Surziches nodded to look at Athena. I do not deny that I have done terrible things, but I have never bothered humans even a little, and I have fulfilled my divine duty by protecting them as every god should do, he said solemnly, while no one could refute what he said. We still have time to repair the damage done, and there is only one way to do it, united, said Athenia, while Seraphol celebrated very emotionally. Well, all that remains is to ask the two forces that, although they are not subject to any faction, their accessories can alter the order in which the world is governed. The Welsh dragon and the vanishing dragon. This caught the attention of those present. I'm fine as long as I can fight strong people, Vali said, shrugging his shoulders. Even in peace you can do it, said Azazel, scratching his neck and then looking at Issei. And you Securite, tell us what you think. Peace is the only option. There is much to protect, said the brown-haired boy, thinking of everyone he loves and his 2 human friends. On the other hand, I plan to destroy everything that harms peace, said the brown-haired boy as his eyes turned emerald and a scarlet aura surrounded him. Calm down, son, Miki Hyoudou mentioned next to Riaz and Asia. I guess there's nothing else to do but sign the peace, Azazel said, shrugging his shoulders. You are right, let's sign, said Hades, being the first to sign the document so that it could then be passed to Athenia by one of the members of the Citri clan, more specifically to Saji, who trembled with fear before the imposing presence of the god of the underworld. It's time to make peace, said Athenia, signing to give the document to Momo, who nodded and took the document to pass it to Surziches, but soon everyone was on guard when they saw the Securite summon his sacred gear and pointed at a wall. They were about to question their actions until a magic circle shone and a woman emerged from it wearing clothes that left little to the imagination. Ethereal Leviathan, descendant of the former Mao Leviathan, what are you doing here without invitation? Said the brunette, while the aforementioned did not even seem intimidated. I came to make our position clear, she said, creating a magic circle, but a kick took her out of the place being given by the chestnut himself. Needless to say, they are attacking us, Azazel said seriously as they looked at the huge magic circle from which wizards, renegade demons and renegade fallen angels came out, but they could do little because they were attacked as soon as they came out. Eteria got up from the ground as she glared at the brunette who was already in front of her Securite. She screamed only to dodge a spear of light as Azazel stood in the air. Boy, let the adults handle adult matters, leave this young lady for this old man, said the fallen man with a smile. Issei choked, wanting to laugh, and then looked at him in a mocking way that is easily misinterpreted. Irokarasu, said the brown-haired boy, and then took flight, but had to dodge a chimera which began to attack at the same time that a basilisk also came out of the magic circle and launched itself at the brown-haired boy. So you want to dance, he said the brown-haired boy in a playful way, and then became serious. Die, he said without further ado, splitting the chimera in half with a kick, making a drop of sweat come out of Kateria's temple. When she noticed the enormous strength of the brown-haired boy, she knew it, that kick could have killed her if it weren't for the snake that office gave her. The brown-haired boy raised his hand, creating a small crimson sphere. Dragon shoot, he shouted, launching it against the basilisk, who without further ado, exploded as he raised his gaze, seeing several more magical beasts emerge from the magic circle. However, suddenly a minotaur fell, who upon seeing him totally ignored him while moving his head from side to side as if looking for something. Issei laughed as he knew well that the minotaur was looking for some son of Zeus or Poseidon, until he noticed how the latter's gaze fixed on his mother and Asia and then looked directly at him. Issei then knew the minotaur had 3 targets and was already beginning to charge against 2 of them. Issei wanted to intervene, but several harpies attacked him, preventing him from arriving in time, while the minotaur extended his weapon against Asia. A huge rumble was heard and blood flew through the air. Asia looked on in disbelief, feeling the fearsome beast gasp for air, reduced to nothing by a single kick from her mother-in-law, only for the remains to be destroyed by several attacks of the power of destruction from Riaz, who gave her a confident look. Irina looked at Zenobia in shock, as the human woman didn't look that strong, but appearances did deceive them, although seeing the fallen hybrid and demon impale several magicians and electrocute them with her lightning made them open their eyes even more. Barakiel looked at his daughter with happiness as he saw her use her full powers, and remembering how Azazel told him that she had avenged Shuri along with what had been done to him, he couldn't help but shed a tear. Azazel for his part watched Kateria Leviathan being surrounded by an aura that was not hers. The raw sound of flesh being pierced echoed across the battlefield as everyone stared in disbelief at what their vision caught as. Divide. Bali, why, Kateria said, looking at him in disbelief. Why are you a hindrance to my plans, he said without further ado in front of everyone's gaze, while his demonic wings rose, and without further ado, he decapitated her with a sword that everyone recognized. Ascalon, Michael shouted as he looked at the situation in disbelief. How? Their vaults are weak, and the light does not affect the bearers of the power of the morning star, he said to the disbelief of the rest. Bali, what does this mean, said Azazel seriously. This side is more entertaining, Azazel, he said as he spread his wings elegantly before everyone's gaze. I am Vali Lucifer, he spread his arms, then looked at Issei seriously. Fate is cruel, don't you think? I do, Issei, said the silver-haired man smiling arrogantly as his aura skyrocketed with great force. It's been hard for me to contain myself for so long, so allow me to spread my wings. With that said, 12 demonic wings spread as the air grew heavier for several of them. Interesting, Issei said seriously, a human-demon hybrid who received a long Inus and carries a sacred sword known for annihilating dragons. Not only that, but he is a descendant of the original Lucifer, said the brown-haired boy seriously. Well, the word miracle was made for me. By the way, I noticed that girl, he pointed at Asia, is expecting a child of yours, right? Issei frowned angrily. Let's do this, Hyoudou, Issei. You will be the one who seeks revenge, and it is the reason why I will kill your parents, and your mistress. Vali fell silent as he felt the brown-haired boy's aura rise far above his own, while his hair changed to black and black armor covered him. The world is a small place, Vali Lucifer, said the brown-haired boy to look at him furiously. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Hyoudou, Issei, heir of the underworld, next king of the realm of the dead, the current security, and no less important, the atmosphere was really heavy, while the specters of Hades knelt before him. Vali broke into a cold sweat at such an aura, but overcame the brown-haired boy's aura in seconds, as he looked at him resolutely. Serzicha swallowed hard as Grafia took his hand, trembling with fear. She then remembered when he took her out of the Hyoudou mansion a month ago with relative ease, and felt her heart racing in fear of what was in front of her. Azazel opened his eyes in disbelief, denying. Michael watched all this, only managing to utter a single word, father, while sweating. Athena smiled and looked at him fondly. Persephone watched with love as her grandson grew in power as the magic circle that brought wizards and creatures was pulverized by the fearsome aura, and the remaining wizards died of suffocation, and the beasts decided to take their own lives, out of fear of whatever was in front of them. Hades let out an ironic laugh as he looked in wonder at his beloved grandson, the one who achieved what neither he nor his brothers could achieve. I am the grandson of the father of all riches, I am the grandson of Hades himself. Face the semi-demon Lucifer, then you will have the honor of facing a semi-god, said Issei as his aura exploded in fury. It doesn't matter if it's in the past, present or future, we are facing the most powerful security in all of history, ever and ever, said Azazel, trembling with emotion. But everyone present was sure of one thing. The two heavenly dragons would fight that night. Finally the clock struck 12 o'clock. Chapter 21. Vali looked resolutely at his destined rival. He never imagined in his wildest dreams that he would be the grandson of the god of the underworld. He arched his eyebrow at the white orb that appeared in the black-haired man's hand, a pocket dimension. The silver-haired man questioned. It will be without interruptions from no one, said the black-haired man, as they were both taken to the pocket dimension. As soon as Hades entered with Persephone, Athena and Miki Hyoudou, they reinforced the dimension with their power. Azazel did not hesitate to follow them, because he knew that the fights of the celestial dragons always ended in unimaginable destruction. Pocket dimension. Issei stared at Vali as they both had their auras at their maximum. No words were needed, nothing else was needed. In a flash, both of their fists collided and an explosion of energy occurred, sending the silver-haired man flying backwards in disbelief. The black-haired man looked at his fist. It's been a long time since he felt pain from a fist collision. Vali advanced at high speed and hit his foot on the black-haired man's chin, and then used several magic circles to damage him, but Issei only moved his hand, destroying the light attacks that the silver-haired man had sent him. Vali felt the enormous pain in his stomach as he saw the raven's fist, only to fly out and hit several mountains and land on his feet, shaking off the dust. That blow really hurt me. I guess it's time to put the games aside, thought the silver-haired man. This guy, he's really strong, even more than Kakabiel, the dark-haired boy thought seriously. Without further ado, both of them just said a couple of words. Balance breaker. Welsh dragon balance breaker, boosted gear scale male. Vanishing dragon balance breaker, divine divide scale male. The leaders and their subordinates were shocked. At the enormous expansive shockwave that was given by the clash of auras, finally both celestial dragons were facing each other, and it even seemed that the spectral figure of each dragon was reflected behind its respective carrier. Human World Kuo Academy. Athenia and the leaders had previously created a magic circle where everyone could see what was happening in the barrier, and the leaders of the biblical factions were stunned by what they saw. All that display of power, and they hadn't even been using their sacred gear, and now they were fighting in their balance breaker. They wondered what both celestial dragons were going to demonstrate. The flashes were many, and the speed was impossible to follow for all those subordinates of the factions who watched attentively, not wanting to miss any detail of what was happening in the enormous magic circle. Issei-san, Asia said as she put her hands in a prayer shape, and beside her, Riaz put a hand on her shoulder as a sign of support and comfort. It hurt the blonde to see all this, and she couldn't help but be worried and distressed. Riaz could understand her perfectly. Unlike her, Asia had never seen the black-haired boy fight and was worried that something might happen to him. Athenia, while looking at the screen, couldn't help but rub the blonde's belly under the incredulous gaze of Seraphol, who was tempted to do so as well, but didn't want to miss a moment of the battle, pouting slightly at her dilemma. Hades clicked his tongue lightly, drawing the attention of the other leaders. He's holding back, Issei. The father of all riches said, annoyed, only to smile later. It's either that or he's leading him down the path of despair. The other leaders looked on with more interest, though Serziches narrowed his eyes. He didn't fully trust the dark-haired demigod. Pocket dimension. Bali kicked the black-haired man in the chin, but noticed that it was only a residual image before receiving a kick in the back. The silver-haired man's sacred gear resonated, and the black-haired man inside his armor smiled sinisterly. Idiot, said Drake boredly. Bali instantly writhed in pain as his sacred gear made a glitching sound, then the silver-haired man vomited blood as he fell to his knees. Bali, Albion exclaimed in concern. Issei stood in front of him, discarding the full armor of the boosted gear. Divine power can be really toxic to mortals, didn't you know that? He said seriously while the silver-haired man looked up from the ground. Not even the excess of mana, prana, Shai, cosmos, chakra, Kai, or any physical spiritual energy can compare to it, he said as he put a foot on the silver-haired man's head and slammed it into the ground. That's the correct position for you to listen, Vali. The difference between gods and mortals is great, even if one is simply a semi-god like me, said the black-haired man, while magical symbols fell upon Vali, stopping his suffering and making him stop having spasms of pain, although the silver-haired man still felt the phantom pain. Even though I held back throughout the fight, you were easily defeated by your own arrogance, in believing that being a descendant of the original Lucifer, you could win any battle, the black-haired man harshly sentenced as he rubbed the sole of his shoe on the silver-haired man's head, only to stop and kick the aforementioned man in the face, throwing him a couple of meters away. Bali felt really humiliated, and as he got up looking angrily at the black-haired man, only to take flight and stay on top. You will pay for this humiliation, Hyoudou, Issei, the silver-haired man shouted in anger, only to concentrate an enormous amount of power in his hand. Wrath of the Morning Star, he said at the same time that Issei became defensive. Die, said Vali, seriously launching his attack while Issei saw this serious. Human World Kuo Academy. Asia screamed in despair at the sound of the explosion created by the silver-haired man's technique. The last thing they saw was the black-haired man crossing his arms. Miki hugged his daughter-in-law, trying to calm her down, but she seemed to be in a fit of hysteria, thinking that the brown-haired boy had perished. If you call that a technique, you're lost, Vali. The black-haired man's voice was heard between the explosion before it was dispersed, leaving him intact. Asia calmed down upon hearing her beloved's voice and looked hopefully at what was happening, although she still had a bad feeling. Pocket dimension. Bali started muttering under his breath and looked quite upset. Issei looked at him, trying to figure out what the silver-haired boy was mumbling about. I envy you to infinity, the black-haired man managed to hear before opening his eyes at the realization of what the silver-haired man was planning, and I will take you to the furthest limits of innocence, the silver-haired man shouted. Juggernaut Overdrive, Albion exclaimed loudly and with some pride in his wielder. After that the armor shone white and blue, and finally a huge white dragon could be seen in the sky, while its chest opened, revealing a huge gem in the middle. Divide was heard, and Issei noticed that his divine energy decreased considerably. You will not survive this, Hyoudou, Issei. Not even the gods have survived this technique, said the silver-haired man, while it was noticeable how the divine energy was concentrated in the gem on his chest before making a strong glow. Long Ina Smasher, Albion announced as a powerful beam of energy headed towards the black-haired man who was surrounded by his divine power and raised his arm towards the attack that Vali had launched at him. Overboosted dragon shoot, the black-haired man mentioned seriously while his sacred gear armor overlapped his Greek armor. Both techniques collided and the explosion covered the entire pocket dimension until it began to fragment. Kabuam XD. The explosion was incredibly violent as the spectators watched us shocked by the amount of energy that was in the place, not even putting part of their power into the pocket dimension it resisted and seemed like it was about to collapse, but Hades granted more power managing to withstand the explosion. Finally there was only dust left in the air as slowly two figures became visible. Vali was in the air breathing heavily as he slowly descended to the ground. Issei was looking at him kneeling on the ground breathing slightly agitated and even holding his left arm with a pained expression which looked terrible. Before getting up and smiling slyly, "I'm not kidding you," he said mockingly, while Vali ended up falling on the cold ground totally exhausted. Vali looked helplessly at the brown-haired man, and it was that Issei as soon as the explosion ended returned to his base state without any exhaustion, and he was a mess. Now he understood why Kakabiel had not survived a fight against a brown-haired man. "To be a demigod, you surpass even half-gods," said the exhausted silver-haired man. "I suppose that it's over," said the silver-haired man resignedly. "At least this fight," said the brown-haired man, while the silver-haired man looked at him incredulously. "In order to provoke your enemy next time, don't lie to a liar." The brown-haired man frowned and saw how a portal opened, and a swordsman came out of it. The brown-haired man looked at the sword with interest. "Kalbrun, or also known as Caliber, a sacred sword capable of killing divine beings," said the brown-haired man seriously but with an enigmatic smile. "I am Arthur Pendragon, direct descendant of King Arthur." "Nice to meet you, Hyoudou Issei. I must say that it is quite a surprise that you know my sword so well," said the young blonde politely. "The pleasure is mine, Arthur Pendragon. I hope to have a meeting with you next time if it becomes possible," said the brown-haired boy looking at him challengingly. "It will be a pleasure to fight with such a fearsome warrior like you, Hyoudou Issei," he said, making an elegant bow. "I appreciate it, and I suppose you came for Vali," said the brown-haired boy looking directly at him. "You guess right," Cortez replied mindfully. "Come forward, my dear young man, you can take your defeated companion," said the brown-haired man, stepping aside. "I thank you, and with your permission we will leave." "Right, Sir Arthur, Vali, see you next time." Without further ado the pair left. "How nice he held me. He asked me if Kiba would like a fight with him too, with that about manners and all," said the brown-haired boy thoughtfully before leaving the place, but not before taking Ascalon from the ground and placing him on his shoulders. "Without further ado I leave the pocket dimension. Human World Kuo Academy." As soon as the brown-haired boy left the pocket dimension he was shot down by a blonde projectile, followed by a red one, and finally a brown one. Issei felt guilty seeing Asia shed tears so sadly, venting the anguish of seeing him fight. He knew he had won the battle, but the blonde never saw him fight. He caressed her head, while doing the same with Riaz, who, although she knew that the brown-haired girl was strong, was very scared when Vali used her juggernaut drive. The chestnut tree's mother, on the other hand, was just waiting for her daughters-in-law to release it. She was going to get angry later. Michael noticed that Ascalon was floating towards him and staying in the air. He took it and put it in his case. "I guess we'll just finish signing the piece, right?" Hades said disinterestedly as the others nodded. Chapter 22. The colossal figure with a great sword was seen right in the middle of a huge golden city on fire, while thousands of fire giants and some ice giants destroyed the place non-stop. She watched in fear as the eyes of the colossal figure looked at her and slowly began to raise her sword, while thousands of Valkyries and Einhjar fought the beasts that came out of magic circles. His fear increased when he saw the colossal sword in the air and about to come down to destroy everything, and finally it came down, but the last thing he saw was a black hair and a red flash. Asgard Master Cabin. Freya opened her eyes in fear. She knew it, she knew what was coming, and her legs did not stop shaking at everything she saw, and she could only utter one word before falling unconscious under the frightened gaze of her guardian Valkyries. Ragnarok. Kuo City Hyoudou Mansion. Issei looked at the silver-haired girl in front of him who looked at his beloved Redeed seriously. "Repeat it again," Rhea said seriously and with annoyance. "We're going to the underworld in 2 weeks," he said seriously. "And why would a renegade from the demon faction go to such a place?" the Redeed said annoyed. "He has not yet been recognized as such. In fact, the Council of the Underworld approved your relationship with Hades' grandson," she said, somewhat annoyed by the last part. "Issei, his name is Issei, since the Peace Summit they keep calling him that," she said frustrated. "Nah, my father does it to annoy," said the brown-haired boy, denying it boredly. "Issei-sama, you are also invited to the meeting of the young devils," Grafia said with difficulty and annoyance first. "Are you going to serve wine?" the brown-haired boy asked, ignoring the silver-haired demon's annoyed look. "No," she said, indignant. "Perfect, I hate wine. Come on, my Riaz," said the brown-haired boy, hugging the Redeed, who blushed and nodded, while Grafia had a vein growing on her forehead. "Ah, that's right, take it." He threw her a card which Grafia took. "It's the invitation to my wedding with Asia. Please go," he said the last thing with annoyance. Grafia smiled and said, "We will be there, Venelana-sama, Ziotica-sama, Surzicha-sama and of course me," she said maliciously, while Issei had a vein grow on his head for each of those names. "Excellent, very excellent," said the brown-haired boy with annoyance as he felt his mother's penetrating gaze at the door. A shiver ran down his spine after the tremendous beating she gave him a month ago. "Without further ado, I'm leaving Ria's Gremory-sama." Hades' grandson Grafia said venomously before leaving the place. Evie, the brown-haired man muttered before receiving a blow to the back of his neck and passing through the wall into another room. Issei-san. Asia's worried cry was heard. "Stupid son, you'll see later," said the brunette before looking at Riaz and smiling. "Do you want tea, Riaz-chan?" she said, and the redhead nodded nervously. Her mother-in-law was scary. After school back of the occult club, Issei stood in front of the two blondes who were part of his beloved Ria's entourage. "Alright guys, as you already know, so far this month, I've been planning a combat strategy for the three of you. After all, the ladies depend on us to protect them," he said, and both Kiba and Gasper nodded. "Alright, on my mark, Gasper now," Issei shouted as a low-level Tartarus beast emerged from a magic circle. Gasper gave a scream as time stopped for the beast who had begun to charge. Kiba instantly created a pair of swords, giving one to Issei on the spot and then cutting the beast in half through the belly. The time of the same returned and he growled in pain, but again he was split in half, but by Issei only, this time from head to toe vertically. Finally Gasper launched a magical attack charged with darkness, destroying the beast completely. Issei smiled because in just a month the little damper was already a fighter, especially because of the confidence that the brown-haired boy gave to the little blonde. "Well done Gasper-kun," Kiba said, giving him a thumbs up and smiling confidently. "Well done Gasper, you make your senpai happy," Issei said as tears of pride ran down his cheeks. Thanks Kiba-senpai," and Nikki the young damper shouted. The three young men were celebrating their great coordination, but a couple of claps made them turn around. They all instantly turned petrified. "Simply bucking amazing," screamed a nail. "This is another level, damn, I want to do something like that too," shouted a boy with glasses. Mama Mitsuda and Motohama Issei shouted quite nervously, while Kiba planned to call a Keno to erase the memory of the pair. "This is amazing Issei, please teach us how to do that," Mitsuda shouted. "Come on man, we're friends right?" Motohama said excitedly. Issei thought about it for a bit. That pair were his first friends their age, so he made a decision. "Guys, do you believe in the supernatural?" he said to the pair who nodded enthusiastically. "How can you not believe that after seeing that?" Mitsuda said, pointing out the obvious. "What if I told you I'm not human?" the brown-haired boy said nervously and regretfully. "Would that make a difference?" "I mean, you're our best friend, old man," Motohama said while Mitsuda nodded in total agreement with that. "Well, Miki Hyoudou is a demon, Gasper is too, and he's half vampire. As for me, I'm a demigod. I'm the grandson of Hades," said the brown-haired boy unsure, changing his hair color to black and his clothes changing. "This is my true form," Issei said, and then looked at the pair, but was speechless when he saw the stars in both of their eyes. "Super cool," Mitsuda shouted excitedly. "Fuck me, that was epic. Our best friend is a demigod, ha ha ha." Motohama laughed thunderously as he approached and put one of his arms around the pair's neck. "You have good friends, Issei-kun," Kiba said with a smile. Issei smiled with a really happy smile. "You are all my best friends," he said, although he put on a serious expression suddenly. "Get out of there, Azazel. I know you are behind that tree," he said, while Kiba became serious as well as Gasper. "Calm down kid, I certainly didn't expect you to reveal the truth to your human friends. On the other hand, I came to see you," Kid said this very friendly with the black-haired man. "What exactly have you come for, Azazel?" he said in a harsh tone, but when he saw his father come out from behind the tree, he got a bad feeling. "What else but to organize your bachelor party," said the fallen one with a smile, causing surprise in the pair of humans. "You're getting married, Issei," said the bald man. "This is something to celebrate. I hope you make Ria's senpai happy," said the one with glasses. "Ria's Gremory? No, he's getting married to his first fiancée Asia Argento," said Azazel, surprising the pair even more. "You have two girlfriends," Issei said, the bald man surprised as he began to rub his fist on the black-haired man's head. "And you were so innocent when you arrived at the academy. I think we weren't a good example for you," Motohama said with a drop of sweat on his neck. "Well, shall we go? I want to get drunk as if there were no tomorrow. I already booked a bar, guys," Loki said without further ado. "Your dad is cool," Aniki said, the little damper excitedly. "Thanks boy, today you will take your first drink of alcohol in your life, and I will make sure it is the best. What do you prefer, meat or nectar?" said the older black-haired man, smiling slyly. "Let it be both," Issei shouted with encouragement. "That's how you talk, boy. Tonight is a man's night. Let's go to a couple of busty girls," shouted Azazel, completely excited. "Breasts," the pair of perverts shouted with a cheerful smile. "That's the attitude, guys," Azazel said as Kiba approached Issei. "I don't think it's a good idea," said the blonde with some uncertainty. Don't be a party pooper, Kiba, what's the worst that could happen? Said the brown-haired boy who had already returned to his base form. Oh boy, you make me so proud, said Azazel as he prepared a magic circle and everyone entered it. This boy fills me with pride, Loki said, smiling, while Issei felt a little embarrassed and was pushed by his friends and followed by Kiba, who was pushed by a very excited Gasper. The next day. Kiba woke up with pink panties on his head. It was definitely a crazy night. I looked to the side and saw Gasper with 3 half-naked fallen angels sleeping hugging him. I really didn't remember anything that happened that night. I look round seeing Loki without a tooth and Azazel lying next to several falls and a Chinese with them. Whatever, but after seeing that Motohama and Mitsuda were in the room with their respective girlfriends, a doubt assailed him. Guys, he said out loud, and everyone woke up to look at him. I have no idea but what happened yesterday. I have a better question, Gasper said, where's Iniki? Chapter 23 check. I have a better question, Gasper said, where's Iniki? He asked doubtfully as he held his head. I know where it is, hahaha, it was a crazy night, you little bitches, said the Chinese guy as he got up from the floor and moved a girl who was lying next to him to sit on the couch. Don't you remember anything? He asked and the others shook their heads. Okay, I'll explain everything to you, okay, I'll wake up with a blow, treat yourself, daddy, he said as he put a good amount of a certain illegal white powder in his hand. Don't you think that's a lot? Azazel said somewhat clumsily as he was still drunk like Loki, who was babbling things about his beloved Miki. Ready for the craziest story of yours? He fell unconscious on the table while a small capuchin monkey pulled his hair. Nobody knew where the hell the monkey came from. Kiba approached and put a hand on his neck and soon he opened his eyes. Scared, he died, he said in panic, while the other young people were scared, although Gasper was pampered by the fallen angels who looked at each other in a clear state of drunkenness. Nah, he's fine, his heart just stopped for a second, boy, Azazel said as best he could while getting up. Kiba simply opened a door where he saw Tsubaki asleep on an armchair wearing a bra the same color as the panties the young demon had on his head. At her feet was a bucking lion sleeping, and on her lap was a baby. Kiba was officially taken aback as he noticed her panties falling from her head, then began to hyperventilate. What the hell had he done tonight? During his shock he walked towards Tsubaki and using a magic circle, dressed her in the female academy uniform. Unfortunately that woke up the lion who began to growl, causing Kiba to come back to his senses. He used a bit of his killer instinct, causing the lion to back away somewhat scared. "Ah, a bucking lion is here," Mitsuda exclaimed, pointing at the lion, who gave it little importance since the huge feline lay down on the ground upon seeing Azazel and purred. "What are you doing here, buddy? Weren't you supposed to be with Mike?" The fallen man said before checking his cell phone and noticing more than 20 missed calls from a contact named Mike. "He's going to want to hit me when he sees me," said Azazel, still drunk. "Nah, bucket, he owes me more," he said without further ado before lying down on the lion. The ground suddenly began to shake, causing Loki to stagger to his feet, only to be thrown out of the room by a fist. Azazel tensed and looked at his subordinate as he had an aura that was certainly scary. "Where is Akeno?" he said with a really scary voice. "I don't even remember what happened last night. What are you talking about, Barakiel? You guys took my daughter in the middle of the night. Do you even know where in the world you are?" But he saw how everyone denied it. "Damn Azazel, you are in Bangkok. You made a mess in Las Vegas, you idiot," said the cadre, quite furious. "And on top of everything, Leslie Chow is being wanted by the law," he finished furiously. "You're exaggerating, damn Bara," said the Chinese man, getting up from the weight, stunned. "Don't call me that, you bucking crazy Chinese piece of shit," the fallen angel shouted out of his mind. "Where is Akeno?" he said in anger. Calm down, I'm going to tell you what happened last night," he said, and everyone sat around the lion who was sleeping peacefully. Leslie Chow. "I was really comfortable in a casino in Las Vegas when they came making a really loud bucking racket, hahaha, you can tell they were already really drunk, hahaha. Anyway, they sat at my table and Azazel greeted me to invite me to celebrate since that damn guy was having his bachelor party. It's Issei Chow. I don't give a shit what Azazel's name is anyway. One of those little buckers that works for Azazel came to the place talking about a new herrig or whatever, hahaha, we got really crazy with that shit, hahaha. Chow, you talk about there is shit. What the hell was that, Azazel? A sedative herrig for dragons. We were developing it to improve surgical operations on high-level dragons. It's based on the dragon apple. And you gave that to my daughter. If the drama queen has stopped bucking around, I can continue. Go ahead, Chow, I want to know what the hell we did this time. Okay, we played a few rounds of cards and made a ton of money, hahaha, and we hired a stripper. That's when that girl came over to talk to Kiba, but she saw him high and got mad, hahaha. I put one of those bucking pills in her mouth and made her swallow it with a ton of vodka, hahaha. She got really drunk in a few seconds, hahaha. Damn, Kiba helped me since he was also really drunk. Okay, that explains what Tsubaki is doing here. Yes, princess, whatever you say, haha. And then what happened? Damn Azazel, if you stop interrupting me maybe I can continue, you bucking crow. Mama continue. Anyway, haha, we went to a mansion and stole this lion, hahaha, damn Gasper, he gave him some really tasty hits, hahaha, damn perverted, half-assed vampire, hahaha. What was I talking about? Ah yes, the bucking Azazel received a message from the seraph. I don't know what the buck and I don't even care, the fact is that that little bastard sent some very tasty angels to leave a message, it's those three of them hahaha. Bucking Gasper paralyzed them with his sasser who the buck knows what and he drank a bottle at each one of them hahaha. She Gasper koo and we love you. We hashazu and sanuo hahaha. Zzz. Hahaha, you bucking crazy Gasper, I thought you were a complete faggot and you turn out to be a bucking crazy person hahaha. Anyway, after Gasper decided to start groping those three over there, who the hell does that bucking ice know that he decided to rob a bank? Hahaha, we have a ton of money and gold, crazy people. Hahaha. This is shit, Mickey is going to kill me. Hey don't worry crazy people, you used a really cool illusion hahaha, we were Power Rangers hahaha, we even did cool poses and everything hahaha. Ha, that sounds good. Ha, the bucking security video is over there on that shelf hahaha, I stole it hahaha. Well anyway, we stole a fishing boat and Mitsuda ran it aground by accident hahaha, he called his girlfriend scared shitless and she came with that stranger. The Keno. Yeah whatever you say, I don't give a damn hahaha, that bucking Acela Virga got a really drunk hahaha and they went to the cabins or whatever it's called hahaha and that bucking Kiba started bucking that girl over there in the front of the boat while Gasper bucked those three in the yacht's minibar hahaha. Isona Citri is going to kill me, that was very low of me. Low hahaha, low is putito hahaha. Continue chow, what else did we do? Well hahaha, after that we arrived in Bangkok and we arrived at a stripper bar hahaha, but the bucking Gasper yelled faggots at them and they kicked us out of there hahaha. Anyway, after that we got more drunk, Kiba stole that monkey that was selling herrings, we got more high, we arrived here renting a room and I fainted. Normal. I finish explaining the whole situation to Chow. And where are Akeno and Issei? Barakiel said as rays came out of his body. You didn't hear me a damn thing there on the bucking yacht, you slob, hahaha, laughed Chow, well drinking more than one bottle hahaha. Bucking hangover, what are you going to get now, you little whores, hahaha. After that he fell to the floor, clearly in a state of drunkenness. Suddenly all the demons and fallen angels in the place felt a chill. So here you were, Azazel, Michael said calmly with a kind smile. I can explain it Michael, he said nervously before Barakiel's angry look and his rays and that calm smile of the seraph. What is it, Azazel? My subordinates are now fallen angels. He said calmly, but a lot of sacred aura surrounded him. Or the fact of all the stupid things they did because of you and Loki, he said to see that the aforementioned was no longer there. Loki, shouted the fallen angel. By the way, what was the Norse god of lies doing here with you? Michael said thoughtfully. Well doing crazy things little bitch hahaha. A dull noise was heard as he became unconscious. I have a better question. Where are the rest? Michael said, noticing that even the tiger was no longer alone, with Leslie Chow and Azazel. Guo City Hyoudou Mansion. His eyes felt heavy, so he was making a monumental effort trying to open them. He smelled that beautiful perfume that his beloved blonde's hair gave off every time she moved to make herself more comfortable, that smell of sunflowers that drove him crazy. Then she perceived that strawberry smell that her beloved Reed released every time she slightly moved her head in her dreams as she was used to. It was then that he noticed a third scent, the smell of lilacs and blackberries. That sensation of having something in his chest made him open his eyes almost immediately, forgetting the enormous tiredness he felt in his body. Violet was the first thing he saw, that pair of enigmatic and seductive eyes looked at him dreamily and happily before seeing her snuggle into his chest. He looked nervously to the left, finding emerald eyes that looked at him with all the love in the world. He changed his gaze to the right, seeing those sapphires that drove him crazy looking at him with intense love, and he wished. Finally he felt how the sheets were damp and he was full of sweat. Finally he managed to say in a clearly hoarser tone of voice because his throat felt dry. What happened yesterday? He said, afraid to know the answer. Suddenly the door to his room opened and Loki entered with a metal bucket and smiling said, "Wake up sleepyheads throwing raw fish." The girl screamed at this. Chapter 24. Loki was under a huge crater in the ground and quite beaten, while Issei's fist was with a trail of smoke coming out of it. So do we have to go? Issei said making puppy eyes at Riaz who made a gesture of slight annoyance. It was your grandfather's orders, she said with a bitter smile. Issei began to stomp on Loki on the ground who complained despite being unconscious. Why the hell does Grandpa force us to go to the young demon meeting? He said as a complaint before getting serious. Riaz, what happened yesterday with Akeno? I don't really remember anything about that, the brown-haired boy asked rather unsure. Evil Issei-kun, did you forget everything you told me last night? Akeno said making Issei sweat. I already screwed up, right? The brown-haired boy said in a low tone, looking at Riaz. Ice, neither me nor Asia are bothered by what happened, we understand things well, and we talked to Akeno about it, as long as she is the last one everything is fine, said Riaz in a loving tone. Ice, I know that I may have abused you a little because you were drunk, I only pretended to be drunk, but I want you to keep in mind that I love you very much, said Akeno with sadness, if you don't love me after this, I will understand and assume that she was suddenly silenced by a kiss from the brown-haired boy who looked her in the eyes. Stop talking, I'm not upset, just surprised, he said and then smiled at her, but you should know that I will marry you last if you're okay with it. He was silenced by a kiss from the raven-haired girl. I'm fine with it, he said smiling and then looked at the door where Miki Hyoudou was watching them while Issei continued to step on his unconscious father. You're going to have to get ready since you're leaving for the underworld in a few hours, Issei. Don't make me hit you if you do something stupid, she threatened as she raised her fist while she was surrounded by a dark aura. Issei just nodded several times quite nervously, even though he kept stepping on his unconscious father. Ai-san, I won't be able to accompany you, since I'll be going with Oka-san later to the meeting, Asia said, playing with her fingers shyly before leaving the room with Issei's mother. The brown-haired boy sighed as he watched a figure of his beloved blonde leave while looking at her belly with tenderness. Underworld Gremory territory. Issei looked seriously at the huge castle in front of him while Risa and Akeno held his hands. Welcome home, Riaz Gremory-sama, the maid said in chorus at the entrance, although Issei noticed the hateful looks that several of them were giving him. It's nice to see you two again, Riaz said without interest as she tried to ignore the glances they gave Issei, even though her aura was lit up in fury. You know this is awkward, Issei said to no one in particular, but Riaz and Akeno nodded while behind them Gasper and Kiba were holding themselves up with a cane each and with large bruises. The damper for the beating received from the three fallen angels who were now sober and Kiba for the beating given by the same Sona Citri. Kaneko seemed totally distracted and staring at nothing in particular, or at least it was until she felt a hand on her head and looked at Issei, who smiled confidently, causing her to smile at his self-proclaimed older brother figure. The little red-haired blur headed towards Riaz, who smiled tenderly when she saw her nephew, who hugged her with emotion. However, Issei looked up at the sky seriously before taking flight before everyone's gaze. So you managed to detect me, boy, said a towering purple dragon. The smell is not something you can hide, Blaze Meteor Dragon Tannen, Issei said with a confident smile. Nice to hear from you, Tannen, I haven't seen you in a while, said Drake from the boosted gear. Nice to see you again, Drake. Ever since I realized that the current wearer of the boosted gear was coming to the underworld, I couldn't help but want to have a showdown. Welsh Dragon fights me on my territory later, Tannen said seriously. It's a fact, said the brown-haired boy with a smile as Tannen left the place. I see you made it here intact, boy, Azazel said from the ground with a pair of crutches and burns all over his body. Well, we still have to face the final boss, Issei said, looking at the silver-haired maid looking at him seriously and with a frown. Issei sighed in defeat and went down to the ground next to Riaz. It's good to see you in good health, Hades' grandson, Graphia said with venom in her voice. I say the same, honorable wife of the demon king Serzich's Lucifer, said the brown-haired man without any emotion. I'll guide you to the waiting room, follow me, Graphia said in her now professional tone, but her frown said how annoyed she was with the presence of the brown-haired boy. Riaz just grimaced and took Issei's hand along with Akeno, who took her other hand as they walked before the gaze of the others, while they were followed by the almost dying Kiba Hyoudou, Gasper Vladi and Azazel, who could barely walk. After walking a bit they arrived at a room where the two leaders of the clan were waiting for everyone, although for a second both parents lowered their gaze when they saw the resentful face on their own daughter. They both sighed, this would definitely be a long day. After a couple of hours of tremendous discomfort for both Ria's parents and the couple in love, Issei now found himself in front of the imposing Tannen, who looked impatient to be able to fight with the Drake Bear. The legendary former Dragon King had really been a long time without having a fight that would really make his blood boil and give him that feeling of life that he had already resigned himself to after trying to save some of his kind. Although the ratings games were something he enjoyed, he had already gone several centuries without participating in one. So for him this fight meant a lot at this moment. Issei noticed this, so without waiting for a signal or anything they both launched themselves at each other. From a safe area, Riaz watched as a shock wave was generated after the clash of the fists of both dragons. She could feel the thirst for combat of both from where she was and could not help but get excited at what was coming. I must admit that you are strong, larva, said Tannen with a challenging smile. And you're not that rusty old man, Issei said smiling in the same way. After saying that, they both hit their fists again only for Tannen to exhale a huge flame. Issei quickly evaded the incandescent fire and launched several dragon shoots at the huge dragon in front of him. Tannen simply used his tail, destroying the projectiles with ease before raising his massive forearm to stop the axe kick the brown-haired boy launched. Without waiting a moment, Tannen hit the chestnut with his tail, which due to the enormous blow hit a mountain, leaving a large crater in it. Riaz from a distance watched in shock as the mountain exploded completely to see her beloved brown-haired boy wearing his balance breaker armor. Suddenly he had to put up a barrier to avoid flying away from the impact of the blow that Issei gave to Tannen on his head. Tannen recovered in the air and launched a huge flame against the chestnut tree, which this time went through easily, but he had to dodge several times Tannen's tail, which he tried to hit him with. Riaz simply watched the clash of both dragons in the distance until she felt a presence behind her. She watched her best friend arrive with a happy smile. Ifufu, Issei-kun is very excited about his fight. How much energy Ifufu has, he said with a genuine smile. Yes, although I notice it strange today as if it were not him, said Riaz watching as the red armor launched a great energy attack towards the enormous dragon, and it launched a gigantic sphere of fire which collided creating a titanic explosion. Both reinforced the barrier to avoid the scorching heat of the explosion. I guess it has to do with your parents' issue, they hate him, and it's very noticeable just like Grafia he doesn't feel comfortable right now, said Akeno, while a red trail in the sky hit the huge dragon, sending it to the ground. He doesn't really hate them, he was just very upset that they treated me the way they did, and I'm not going to deny that I'm just as upset as he is for being here, but it hurts me to see him like this. Riaz saw how Tannen slammed the brunette to the ground before being hit by a kick to the chest and flying into the air. Yes, I understand you. My chest hurts to see him repress his feelings and pretend that everything is fine, even though it hurts him not to be able to get along with your parents. I found out that my father is also very angry with him for what happened last night, said Akeno, although she couldn't help but blush when she remembered the intense night they spent. Yes, and that worries me, what the hell? He said as he saw how Issei was now dodging holy rays from Barakiel himself. I must stop my father, Akeno said regretfully, but Riaz shook her head. Let them solve this between themselves, only men know how to solve their differences between themselves, it's not something we can interfere in, no matter how much we want to, said Riaz knowing well how stubborn men are, and especially the brown-haired boy. Meanwhile Issei stopped the lightning attacks that Barakiel launched at him with the intention of killing him. You're a damn Sekiryuite, you defile my baby, the cadre shouted in anger. Issei dodged the spear of sacred rays and launched a dragon shoot against Barakiel. It's not my fault, I didn't expect that to happen just like that. Do you think I don't feel guilty about that? Issei shouted, getting more and more upset. What guarantees me otherwise? Do you think that because you are the grandson of Hades you can do whatever you please? You had no reason to involve my daughter in your damn Sekiryuite affairs, Barakiel shouted furiously. Akeno is free to do whatever she wants, even Shuri understood that, said the brown-haired boy, making Barakiel even more enraged. Don't name my late wife and drag her into this. What do you know about my family? Barakiel questioned furiously as he prepared a huge spear of light with holy rays flashing from it. I know about her because Akeno visited her in the Elysian field. Since then Akeno stopped hating you, it was because she asked her to, Issei shouted, seeing how the spear of light vanished, and Barakiel stared at him. You're not lying, are you? My Shuri is in the Elysian fields, he said in a broken voice. She's my grandmother's best friend, I wouldn't lie about that, Issei said seriously, while Tannen patiently watched what happened. Shuri, Barakiel said melancholically, looking at the horizon, can I see her at least one last time? The man asked with pain and longing in his voice. Issei just nodded as he created a magic circle of communication. Pandora prepared to receive the fallen angel of cadre level Barakiel and take him to the Elysian fields. They will meet with the mother of my third fiancé Himejima Akeno, asked Issei without noticing Barakiel's frown or the exalted vein in his head when he said that Akeno was his third fiancé, but without saying anything he just calmed down in order to see his beloved Shuri. Without further ado, Issei created a magic circle so that Barakiel would be transported to the Elysian fields. Chapter 25. Issei looked to his left side at Riaz, who took him by the arm and snuggled into his shoulder while giving him a tender smile. On his other arm was Akeno, who, like Riaz, was resting her head on his other shoulder. Behind them walked Kiba, now without the bandages and only with a black eye, while Gasper walked calmly beside him, although it was noticeable that he was faking the damage he received very well. Behind the group came Kaneko, looking at the back of her beloved senpai and older brother figure. She was very fond of the brown-haired boy, but she couldn't help but think about her older sister, which made her stay behind the group. All of them were dressed elegantly with tuxedos for the men and elegant dresses for the women, except for Akeno, who was wearing a black kimono with gold details. Their path was interrupted when Sona Citri found them on the road with her entourage, while giving Kiba Hyoudou a scathing look, although Tsubaki was nervous and blushing just like Kiba. Hello Riaz, are you ready for the meeting of the young devils? I heard that a special guest will come tonight as a symbol of peace between the factions of the alliance, said Sona with a smile to her dear friend. Yes, I've heard about that, Sona. It seems they want to make an alliance with the gods of the north, although I feel a bad feeling as if something is going to happen, Ria said with concern, although feeling a kiss on her head comforted her. Without a doubt Issei knew how to calm her down. Yes, although it can also be problematic to have the young demons waiting in the same room, Sona said with an annoyed expression. You're right, Ria said in the same way. Suddenly the door exploded and both Kiba and Gasper stood on guard while in the shadows, 4 pairs of purple eyes looked at each other with a frown. As soon as they entered the place they saw a couple of demons arguing about something. Same as always, right? Said a young man with black hair and notable muscles to the group of demons. You're right, Sareog Issei. He is my cousin, Sareog, heir of the Bale house said Riaz, introducing her cousin, Sareog. He is my fiancé, Issei, prince and heir of Hades. It is a pleasure to meet the dear cousin of my beloved fiancé. I see that the heir of the Bale house is quite strong, said Issei with manners to move to a more challenging tone while extending his hand. The pleasure is mine, and I can see that you are also extremely strong, Sareog said with the same tone of voice as Issei, while they both squeezed his hand with colossal force as the ground beneath them began to shatter. The other 2 demons couldn't help but look at the heir of the Bale house and the prince of the underworld shaking hands tightly as the ground beneath them was torn apart by the pressure. Finally both of them let go of the other. Strength worthy of a demon who could split a high-class dragon in half with his bare hands, Issei said smiling pleased. Same here and I honestly didn't expect anything less from you. One day we'll face each other in training, Sareog said in a challenging tone. Yes, and I'll be looking forward to that day, Issei said in the same way. It's a fact, I'll be eager and train hard too, hi do Issei, Sareog said, satisfied. Likewise, I will also train intensely, Sareog Bale Issei said with a sincere smile. However, all the animosity was interrupted when they heard an annoying scream. I don't give a shit if you get offended, but your disgusting virgin smell bothers me. We can solve this if I take you to bed and make you my Sikvara Gare's bitch, said the demon with the look of a punk-style delinquent. Get out of here with your disgusting dead dog scent, Zephyr Glaciolabolas, the blonde demon said contemptuously. It seems that you will only understand if I take you to bed, then I will take care of the other virgins, and also the bitch of Rye. Her words died in her throat the moment the oxygen could not pass through her. It would perhaps be the enormous and ruthless thirst for blood that was concentrated right on the no. It would then be that terrifying aura full of death that exploded throughout the room and caused chills to everyone. No. The words just wouldn't come out of his mouth due to the simple fact that. It seems that you want to die, should I help you with that? Issei said as he grabbed him by the throat, raising him like a rag doll, while everyone present saw the spectral figure of Drake grabbing Zephyr by the neck and with his jaws open waiting to devour that imbecile. Even think about finishing what you were about to say again, and the demonic house of Glaciolabolas will have to look for. Another heir, Issei said contemptuously before throwing the heir of the Glaciolabolas house against the wall, leaving him embedded and unconscious. Issei looked at the stunned and terrified Sikvara who looked like she was going to faint at any moment. Ara Sikvara-san, come with me, I'll fix your makeup, said Riaz taking her with her, while Issei turned off his aura and his bloodlust at the same time as Drake's figure threw one last sharp look in the form of a threat to everyone in the room before disappearing. Issei, seeing the damage to the room due to the previous conflict, snapped his fingers and it was simply restored suddenly, leaving everything in order. But the problem that Issei had was that he had the feeling or premonition that he would end up killing someone in this room in some not too distant future, some poor devil who would be cruelly murdered by him. After waiting for a while, Riaz arrived with Sikvara and the young demons began to greet each other until they were called to a room where the leaders were. They were asked to tell their dreams and aspirations and each one said what motivated them about their future. I will be the future Empress of Crimson Destruction, I will have my children with my beloved fiancé, and we will rule Hades with honor and justice, alongside the Empress of Emerald Twilight, Riaz said solemnly. I'm sorry if I misunderstood you, but Miss Gremory, I understand that you wanted to be the Empress of the rating games. What made you change your mind? Asked one of the elders of the council, who, despite the question, was satisfied with what he heard Riaz say. That was a whim and a silly dream. Now I have my feet firmly on the ground, so my previous dream is just something banal, she said solemnly while raising her hand showing an engagement ring with a strange red diamond. I now consider rating games as simple games for immature children. That last thing made most people angry, including her cousin, who didn't believe he heard that from Riaz. I understand, thank you for answering, said the old demon, swallowing his anger in favor of not angering the black-haired man next to the red-haired girl who was looking at him seriously. Little did he know that Issei was only thinking about what he was going to have for dinner tonight. Now you are the heir of Sona Citri, tell us your dream, asked an old demon. I wish to open a school that teaches all races about rating games regardless of status or any racial difference, generation, or if it is a high class, low class or reincarnated devil, it will be taught equally, she said, and Issei did not hesitate to give a couple of applauses. A very good dream, I hope you fulfill it because I will send my children to study there, said Issei, although from his tone, it was not known if it was a request or a threat. Little did they know that he was actually thinking if Rias wanted one or more children and if they would have a taste for rating games. Serafal, hearing the support of Hades's grandson, was excited but clenched her jaw in fury when she heard the tone in which he spoke to her beloved younger sister. Well, we have already heard each and every one of your dreams, so now we have to organize your future rating games fights and enjoy what's left of this evening, Serziches mentioned, knowing that his sister did not want to participate but was forced by Hades himself, who wanted to see if her progress was worthy of his grandson, even though Issei only wanted to have dinner and go to sleep. After the introductions, everyone headed to a large hall where a grand ball would take place, although Issei noticed that Kaneko was heading for the exit following a small black cat. Asper looked at him and nodded, following him closely, along with a real illusion of the black-haired boy. He could sense an incredible power in the place, one that he was sure was that of a deity. He was not mistaken because the god of the north himself was there. The murderer of his two older brothers. Odin, who was being accompanied by a young silver-haired Valkyrie. Issei suddenly stood on guard as he felt two pairs of eyes staring at him as if he were prey. The god of the north was on guard, as were many of those present when they felt various divine presences in the place. Then he saw them and prepared for the worst. I notice how that pair of divine beasts began their run and they passed by him, ignoring him despite having Gunnar in hand. This pair of divine beasts, who were destined to devour two deities, launched themselves at the black-haired grandson of Hades. Everyone expected the worst, but nothing prepared them for what came next. Uncle Skoll and Hadi shouted as they were taken by Issei, who welcomed them with open arms. Fenrir simply walked past Odin without even looking at him, as if he didn't exist to him, which baffled him given the fact that he was destined to kill him. "Brother, I'm glad to see you in good health," Fenrir said, apparently smiling, if you could say so. Everyone felt a chill, only to be stunned by the sight of the divine beauty in a blackish-green dress, which showed off her divine figure, which was, to put it mildly, surprising. "Little brother, how are you? That suit looks good on you, it makes you look very attractive," she said with a tender smile and taking the brown-haired boy by the cheeks. Finally there was that man whom many feared, the one who was destined to cause chaos and destruction and initiate the end of the world. He walked next to a young woman with brown hair and a young blonde woman who was clearly pregnant. This path with a pair of women to the black-haired man. "It's good to see you healthy, son. I hope you're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner," he said with a mocking smile, while Issei made a rather funny face at being discovered by his father. Odin just looked at that man and said a few words that made the hearts of the other spectators tremble, except for a few of great power: Hati, Skoll, Hela, Fenrir and Loki. Chapter 26. Odin just looked at that man and said a few words that made the hearts of the other spectators tremble, except for a few of great power: Hati, Skoll, Hela, Fenrir and Loki, he said with total seriousness, especially the last two names. "The god of lies, Loki-sama, what do you intend to do here?" the Valkyrie said on guard and very nervously. Loki ignored them and fixed the collar of Issei's suit since it was on wrong, then he licked his fingers and combed his hair, since he had slightly messy hair. "Loki, are you trying to bring about Ragnarok?" Odin shouted, annoyed at being ignored, even though if things were as clear as the situation made them seem, the little black-haired boy was indeed Loki's son. "Answer me," he shouted, even more annoyed. "Issei, you must learn to comb your hair, son," said Loki, finishing combing his hair and then looking at Odin. "Ragnarok, that is a stupidity that I will not commit," he said, then looking at his pregnant daughter-in-law with tenderness and then at his son, then looking at his other two daughters-in-law. "I would not do something so banal as to sacrifice what I have managed to obtain my family," he said seriously. "Love Miki Hyoudou said smiling happily, Northern god Odin, my husband has no intention of causing trouble, aside from his silly jokes," she said. She is watching Loki use his powers to make Issei look like a Super Saiyan. "Your wife Loki? And what about Sigyn Loki? Have you forgotten her?" Odin said seriously. "I give up my children and abandon myself. Do you expect me not to feel anything beyond hatred and resentment against her?" Loki said with irony and some resentment. Hela stepped forward, standing in front of Odin. "God, leader of Asgard, my father has no interest in bringing Ragnarok to the Nine Realms, so desist from creating a conflict," he said in a firm tone. "Hela, I just have one question for you, where the hell did you take Helheim and Niflheim?" the god of the north asked seriously. "To the kingdom of my leader, of course," he said solemnly and with a smile. "Leader? I'm supposed to be your leader," Odin said with genuine annoyance. I never swore loyalty to you or Asgard, so you are not my leader. My leader is. She was interrupted by a sound echoing in place similar to a cane. I am your leader, he said in an imposing voice as he walked slowly and elegantly while being accompanied by two women. In his hand was his two-pointed centerpiece, which was adorned with the most precious jewels that everyone in the room had ever seen. Hades, Odin said cautiously, what does this mean? The North god said with annoyance. Helheim no longer exists, only Hades, said the ruler of the underworld. Hela herself has granted me her kingdom, but this is not for me, of course, it is for my dear grandson as well as my kingdom and everything I possess, said Hades seriously and imposingly. Hades, Loki, what the hell are you two up to? I questioned them seriously. What every father and grandfather wants for their son and grandson respectively, their happiness, said Hades looking at Issei, who looked at him moved. How could I trust you, Hades, or you, Loki? The god of the north questioned again. Suddenly a door opened and out came a tall and muscular Reed with a prominent beard, a small hammer hung on his waist, and he had a completely confident smile. I'll fix this, father, said the Reed in a self-confident and somewhat arrogant voice. Thor, what are you doing here? Odin said seriously. Coming to meet and challenge the son of who was once my best friend, he said pointing at Loki to look at Issei. I challenge you, Hyoudou, Issei, son of Loki and prince of Hades. Utgarda will hold her annual event in Jotunheim in a few days. There I will crush you, said Thor seriously but confidently, looking at the brown-haired man firmly and then looking at the rest of those present in the place, and this challenge is for everyone present who wants to participate. I will crush you, Thor said seriously before turning around. That includes you, father, he said, retreating in a flash very similar to a rainbow. Issei took a step and ignited his aura with power, and looking at Odin said, tell the hammerhead that I will wait there to show him who is the strongest. Also tell him that I wait and bring his children Modi and Magni. A thunderous laugh was heard in the place. Everyone looked at Sarajeag, who smiled challengingly at Issei. This will be more interesting than the rating games, Hyoudou, Issei. I'll see you there, he said smiling. This is getting interesting, Azazel said before taking a step. I like challenges, and this one will be worth it, he said smiling confidently. I wonder if Thor is ready to lose, Loki said playfully. After such a challenge I can't just sit back. I also challenge you, grandson of Hades and Seker Uate, said the Male Leviathan. So this is how things will be. Thor is your father. I will have to put you in your place, said Odin before looking at Issei, and also this way I can measure your worth, son of Loki, he said before turning around. See you at the event, brats of the Abrahamic bastard, having said that he left with his escort through the Bifrost. Meanwhile outside the building. Hineko was blushing as hard as could be, while Gasper hugged her from behind. At this moment she cursed that the damper had trained with her senpai, because he had her literally immobilized. Kuroka, the black-haired man with a mocking smile in front of her, until now had neutralized each and every one of his attacks, not only hers, even those of her Biku partner, were totally neutralized with ease. Kuroka-chan, don't tell me you've already given up. There's your dear little sister, you just have to ignore me to take her, or can't you? The brown-haired boy said in a mocking tone, making ridiculous movements. Come on, Kuroka-chan, Biku Dono, attack with everything, he said playfully, opening his arms to the sides. Of course Kuroka didn't hesitate to attack, and even so, the bastard hit her again with a toy hammer on the head. She was furious that she couldn't defeat him. Biku launched himself with his staff surrounded by Senjutsu and Tauki. He lassoed it towards Issei. Then it happened. Issei shouted as he was hit. In its noble parts, in the family jewels. Biku broke out in a cold sweat, unconsciously holding his body part. Even Gasper was scared. Then Issei stood up and punched himself in his private parts in mockery. I have them made of Tensgeno, he said, squeezing the area mockingly. You are a Biku shouted with anger and shame at the mockery they made of him. You did it on purpose, damn son of Loki, he said, already in rage and shame. They played with him too much, even for his mocking and relaxed way of being. He had already lost his temper in front of this jester. And you've been fighting an illusion all this time, said a cold, emotionless voice behind him. He began to run out of air, and the aura of death behind him didn't help with this. A cold hand was placed on his shoulder, and his body tensed completely. His instincts screamed at him to run away, but his body didn't respond, but he still turned his head slowly to look at him. There he was, and he didn't look friendly at all, compared to the illusion he and Kuroka were fighting with. What kind of monster was this guy? Even among the gods he had fought before, this being was in another league. Issei simply let go and noticed how the space was cut right in front of him, and Biku came out of it, a blonde with a lens, quite pleasant for Issei. Sir Arthur Pendragon, it is an honor to see you again, my dear and illustrious young man, said Issei, making an elegant bow. The honor is undoubtedly mine since I have had the opportunity to see you again, my dear and famous companion. Today I have come for my two companions, but I repeat to you again that I will be eager to have a fight with you at some point, said Arthur, also making an elegant bow. I will be patiently waiting for our future meeting, Sir Arthur. You may properly arrange to send your faithful companions back. I wish you a good evening, and I extend this invitation to my future wedding," said Issei, extending a letter which was the invitation. "I'll be there on the appointed day. Without further ado I leave, and I gladly wish you and your fellows a nice evening. I hope my intrusion was not to your displeasure," said Arthur with a smile. "By no means, Sir Arthur. Was your introduction to this place proper and appropriate? I hope to see you again and give my warmest greetings to the White Dragon Emperor. Without further ado we also retire. See you soon, Sir Arthur, and blessed be you and your peers." Issei made an elegant bow again and turned around, retreating with Issei. "What the hell? I felt like I was going to die, and the next moment I see two rich kids talking with words that I don't understand. He even invited you to his wedding. What's wrong with that guy?" Iku said, exasperated, and he wasn't the only one, because Kuroka felt humiliated. During the battle, Issei's illusion told her that the only older brother Kaneko needed was him, making her feel so helpless for not even being able to touch him, or for the fact that he said it, while Kaneko looked at him fondly. Without further ado they left the place, one with frustration and a hidden desire, another with frustration and a feeling of loss, and the last one with a genuine smile at being invited to the wedding of someone he already considered a friend. "Issei-senpai," said Kaneko while Issei hugged her at the entrance to the building. "Don't worry, my dear Kaneko-chan, I promise to be the best older brother in the world," he said, giving her a hug, while the white-haired girl cried on his shoulder with happiness. Chapter 27. Issei was nervous. He was wearing a very elegant suit, and it was no wonder, because today was the day. I slowly walked towards the altar while watching Hypnos acting as the one who would marry them tonight. At the place were Mclanta Cutley and Mcteka Sihutl as the best men. Behind them were Loki and Miki, their beloved parents, was their beloved Riaz, accompanied by her entourage, her parents, and the Demon King Lucifer with his wife and son, the leader of Heaven Michael, accompanied by Shidu Arena, Griselda Quarta, the Seraphim Gabriel, and the Zenobia Quarta. Sona Citri was also present with her entire entourage, accompanied by Seraph Leviathan. Behind them were Demeter and Yasion, accompanied by Hera, Artemis, Athena, Hestia, and Hermes. Arthur Pendragon himself was there with his sister and a beautiful blonde-haired maiden. Issei finally reached the altar where his beloved grandfather was waiting for him. The brown-haired boy gave him a smile before looking ahead. The music started playing, and then he saw her. The white dress adorned with pearls and diamonds, a transparent white veil which hid her beautiful face. Perfectly made up, which only highlighted the beauty of her beloved. She came escorted by 5 specters that were previously fallen angels. Finally she reached the altar, and the music stopped in the brown-haired man's eyes. She was beautiful, incredibly beautiful, those emerald eyes that drove him crazy, and that smile that hypnotized him. The ceremony was not very different from a normal wedding, but the atmosphere was truly beautiful. 2 souls uniting for eternity, a ring symbolizing their eternal union and commitment to it, a kiss that sealed their destiny forever. Happiness is the most beautiful gift that any being can imagine, intoxicating and sweet like nothing else in life, a true happiness that simply becomes eternal and embraces with a pleasant warmth. Warm and vivid like the sunrise on a summer day, beautiful like the falling leaves in autumn, a beauty like the falling snow in winter, but above all it was spectacular like the birth of flowers in spring. The spring of their lives together had begun. A life together, a child on the way. Issei carried Asia in his arms towards the exit, but stopped abruptly and carefully put her down, while his eyes sharpened dangerously. He walked several steps away from her as all the guests lit their auras. Hades, Persephone, Hestia, Riaz, Hermes, Mclanta Cutley, Athena, Hera, Artemis, Cerziches, Graphia, Azazel, Loki, Demeter, Michael, Hela, Fenrir, Hadi, Skoll, and Cerberus himself protectively surrounded Asia. Many of the guests began to sweat nervously, while others stared angrily at the presence in front of them. Hatred was present, and the temperature of the place rose sharply. The ground beneath Issei began to break as small fragments of it began to float due to his enormous anger and dangerous aura. Any animosity that the wedding caused died at that moment and was replaced by pure anger. A disgusting and pedantic presence in the place which looked at the others with disdain and with clear mockery. That damn presence. That damn god. What are you doing here? Damn piece of shit, Issei declared angrily. I must take this as a threat, Hades said imposingly and looking with hatred at the god in front of him. The god just smiled mockingly and looked at them as if they were nothing before speaking. Do you know that the love between a god and a mortal is hybris? Worse yet, a disgusting hybrid of a Jotun and a hybrid demigoddess, bitch. That is a sin in itself. Your existence is something that should not be. Pestilent Red Dragon Emperor, you are only an existence that must be eradicated, the god said mockingly before putting on a grim expression. You and the bastard she carries in her womb must be eliminated. Hi do Issei, he said, before his aura rose to levels worthy of a high-ranking divinity. Of course, there is someone else who not only wants your head, but who personally asked me to be able to take. Revenge since you took away what was rightfully hers, he said mockingly at the same time that one more presence was felt in the place. Was I wrong? Diodora asked. Finally the demon appeared right next to the god along with another brown-haired demon. You're not wrong at all, you've kept your end of the bargain, take that hybrid and kill that pesky god of deception, we'll take care of the brat. Shalba Beelzebub, as the demon king Lucifer I will eliminate you from existence, said Surzich furious at the betrayal he was seeing. Stupid little brother, this betrayal is unforgivable, joining the Cows Brigade you can kill him, Hyoudou Issei, the underworld doesn't need traitors. It seems like you never learn, do you? I've told you before and I'll tell you again, you're no sun god Apollo, Hermes said seriously. I'll kill you this time. I will kill you, you filthy red emperor dragon, and I will make my dear Asia Argento aboard, I will purify her of your filthy impurity, you bucking dragon, he said with palpable hatred. However, suddenly an aura of death exploded with uncontrollable anger. Everyone undoubtedly felt the anger of the one to whom this aura belonged. However, Diodora was not intimidated and increased his aura, along with the power of the new office snake, which was entrusted to him. Several people opened their eyes in surprise, as the level of the renegade demon was enormous, a power that he was not supposed to have. The level of a Mau-class demon. Issei looked at him before his hair turned black, and his skin took on a slightly dark blue tone for the first time, his aura was black and full of death wishes. It was only an instant, Apollo crossed his arms in time, but his other two companions did not react in time, being sent outwards with incredible force. Once outside, the ceremony site was enveloped in a powerful barrier. Issei, let us out immediately. Loki shouted with anger and helplessness. Issei just ignored him before taking a few steps as his sacred gear made itself present. You the god and the two demons present, said Drake from the boosted gear. HMP the Securitate spoke from that piece of trash, Apollo mentioned with annoyance and disgust. What do you want, you filthy lizard? Don't you see that I want to kill your imbecile carrier? Diodora said with hatred. What do you want? Insignificant trash, said Shalba Beelzebub with disdain. Soon the atmosphere began to feel a strong presence of death, and it will be combined with an incredible thirst for blood. You have made the worst decision of your life, Drake mentioned at the same time that the black-haired man's eyes turned emerald green and with the pupil slit like a reptile. At that moment Issei's aura exploded with fury as his balance breaker made its presence felt at the same time as the ground began to shake. A single second was enough to throw Diodora to the ground in what was now a huge crater. Shalba was no better because even with the power of the office snake, his defenses fell before the colossal blow dealt by Issei. Apollo for his part stopped the blow with his arm, confident that he could stop it, now his counter fist was slammed into his face. Issei threw a kick at the god's face, while the barrier he had created was destroyed by Hades, who was not happy that his beloved grandson had trapped them in a powerful barrier. Loki instantly grabbed Apollo by the hair as his skin took on a dark blue hue and his eyes turned black. Apollo tried to get up before being hit by Diodora's body, which was thrown by Issei with a kick. Shalba stood up furiously before raising his hand, showing the back of his hand with the office symbol, while a black aura with snake shapes surrounded him all over his body before his aura rose with aggression and fury. Securitate. He shouted in fury before launching himself towards the young black-haired man. Issei crossed his arms only to receive the impact of Shalba's fist, making him retreat several meters while pieces of his armor came off. You will die, that is a fact, demon declared Drake without any kind of feeling involved. Issei was surrounded by a dark red aura like blood itself before giving a guttural roar and launching himself against Shalba. Shalba launched several magic spells of sacred attribute through a special device, along with others of demonic attribute, only for these to be discarded by Issei, only using his forearm destroying them one by one. Once he reached Shalba, he hit his fist in his face, managing to avoid it far away, only to reappear at an enormous speed behind him, the demon strongly impacting his back while a crude crunch was heard in the place, managing to stop Loki's fight with Apollo, which. Then Issei threw Shalba Beelzebub into the air, leaving him high up in the air. The incessant pain had left Shalba semi-unconscious and unable to resist, as his spine had been broken by a single blow. Issei for his part raised one of his fingers, while several boosts were heard from the same boosted gear, and the energy accumulated at the tip of the finger, creating a small sphere of green energy, which only accumulated the power of the sacred gear and the divine power of Issei. Then it happened, a fact that would be marked by history, permanently making it known that Issei is and always will be the most powerful Securitate in history. Long Ina Smasher sentenced Drake, while the powerful beam of energy arose majestically towards where Shalba was, who only managed to shout a curse as his last words. Damn you Securitate. Without further ado, he was swallowed by the beam of energy being pulverized. Issei looked up only to see Apollo flying by from a strong blow from his father, but a cry of pleading made him turn around to see Diodora Astaroth cornered by Gasper, who looked like a mass of living darkness, and creatures with bloody red eyes and mocking looks came out of him as they ferociously tackled Diodora, who ended up at Issei's feet. I knew the day of the young devil meeting that he would cruelly kill some poor fool on the spot. I didn't think he would be so fast, Issei said in a flat voice as he took Diodora's arm and with one leg began to push Diodora's shoulder, causing him pain. The demon's screams did not take long to arrive, and while he launched as many attacks as he could with his free arm, it was all in vain. The armor was not even damaged in the slightest. Finally, Diodora's entire arm was cut off with a grotesque sound, causing Diodora to scream so heartbreakingly that Apollo fled the scene. "That was for breaking into my wedding with Asia," he said without further ado, before giving him a strong stop in the face, with force knocking out all the young demon's teeth. "And this will be for the expulsion of Asia. Did you think I wouldn't realize, you bastard?" the brunette shouted angrily, before grabbing him by the hair and hitting Diodora's face with his knee several times before starting to hit him in the face with his fists brutally. Diodora's blood began to fill the helmet of the armor until finally Diodora stopped responding. However, Issei illuminated Diodora with his divine energy, bringing him back to life again. "I never said your death would be quick, you damn piece of shit," said the brunette with contempt, taking him by the leg and letting his elbow fall on said limb, breaking it brutally before Diodora's agonizing screams. Finally, Hades's bident was nailed into Diodora's skull, while the father of all riches stood in front of Issei, and he deactivated his two armors. A loud bang was heard at the scene. Hades had slapped Issei. "Think with a cool head, my dear grandson. If Asia were conscious and saw what you've done, she would be afraid of you. Act like the god that you are, not like a bloodthirsty beast, my grandson," Hades said, retreating from the place and snapping his fingers, repairing all the damage, including Diodora's disfigured corpse or what was left of it. Chapter 28. The brunette could be seen with heels in her hand, smoke was coming out of them while she was breathing heavily. Asia was in the arms of Persephone, who was sweating cold. Loki hid behind his father-in-law, who understood perfectly why he did it. He didn't judge him for it. And Issei, well, he was unconscious and quite injured on the ground. While he writhed in agony before losing consciousness, he swore not to make his mother angry again. Then she looked at Loki intently and walked up to him, gently taking him by the cheeks. "Thank you for defending me from Apollo, my beloved Loki," she said, giving a kiss to the god of lies, who gently hugged his wife. "It is the least a husband should do for the woman he loves, and I swear to him his eternity," he said, looking into her eyes with much love. "Now then," she said, pausing before looking at him with a frown, "I heard that you and that plucked crow took Issei to a bachelor party. I was wrong," she said with a very sweet voice that did not match her increasingly furrowed brow, while her grip grew tighter to the point that Loki began to sweat with nervousness. Yes was the only thing he managed to say because of his nerves. Miki's frown disappeared to smile happily. "I see," she said. Unexpectedly for many, the ground began to shake as everyone watched in horror as Miki massacred Loki by hitting him against the ground in the purest berserker style. On the other hand, Sona Citri was in front of Miki Hyoudou, who was sweating in terror. "Crash Hyoudou," she called him, and he stiffened. "You're going to have to take responsibility for your actions. First of all, you're going to have to." She couldn't continue because her queen covered her mouth and she was stunned. Never had her dear best friend interrupted her, much less in that way. "Icho, leave this in my hands," she said in a serious tone before taking Kiba by the tie. "You're going to have to reward me for everything you did to me," she said in a serious tone. "Hi," Kiba said nervously as he looked at Tsubaki with some fear. "You're going to have to fulfill all my whims and have to put up with my bad mood from now on." Kiba nodded several times. "You're going to have to take me where I tell you." Kiba nodded again, while Tsubaki softened her gaze. "You're going to have to be there for me for the rest of your life," she said nervously, while Kiba stared at her before blushing deeply and nodding. "You're going to have to take care of us for the rest of our lives," she said while taking her belly. Kiba nodded several more before giving her a kiss on the lips. "I was Shinra. I swear to you as a knight of the Grimoire, but I also swear to you on my life as Miki Hyoudou. I will protect you with my life." "Wait, will I protect you?" he questioned himself before realizing and then going blank. "An incredibly low birth rate and still on the first try," he said before falling unconscious under the astonished gaze of Sona Citri. Later he would get even with her for getting her best friend pregnant. Issei began to wake up only to be hit again by a holy beam, leaving him out of action again. "That was because of my damn promiscuous brat Akeno," he said while being surrounded by a sacred aura and lightning. You're still angry, darling," said Shuri as she took him by the arm. "Do I remind you how you took me the first time?" she said as she stared at him. "It was you who assaulted me in bed while I was recovering, Shuri. I enjoyed it," Barakiel said calmly, while his wife blushed a little before biting his ear. Asper for his part was surrounded by the three now fallen angels and was sweating nervously. You got me pregnant, idiot Waya, cried one of them while shaking the poor damper. How are you going to reward us for all the harm you've done to us, perverted damper? Said another while slapping him several times. This better not be the last time, said the last one, so that the other two and the damper stared at her. I wasn't that drunk and I did enjoy it, she said firmly to the disbelief of Gasper and the other two. Besides, you got me pregnant the first time, you're going to have to take care of me and my baby, said this one, already somewhat shy. I will take responsibility was what Gasper said of the three. He said the last thing, looking them in the eyes, calming them down immediately. Meanwhile Hades tried to talk to his daughter to calm her down but was interrupted by an Asian human. Come on, Miki, you arrived with Pinche's wife and his fiancé, grabbed the Locas and bucked him on the roof of the yacht while they drank hydro. Who knows what the buck said, Leslie Chow, pointing at the accusing mind, making Miki stop. What's more, when we stole the monkey you were coming with us and I have it on video, she said, showing her cell phone, making Miki embarrassed since in the video, she was clearly seen hugging the monkey excitedly. So that happened, Hades said behind him. Yes, that's exactly what happened, hahaha, they looked funny when they dressed up as clowns and danced on the stairs, hahaha, laughed Leslie Chow while showing another video. Hades just looked at the phone to look at his daughter who was sweating nervously. He thought he had deleted all the evidence, but he didn't expect the Chinese guy to still have the videos. Miki, I'll talk to you later, Hades said with a harsh tone of voice, making it clear that he was not going to get away with it. Issei tried to get up again, but was hit with a mesa center by his grandmother, leaving him unconscious again. Spoiled, rascally brat, you'll see when you wake up what's going to happen to you for being rebellious, and you're not saved, Hyoudou, Miki declared. Hyoudou Hanabira quite annoyed, while the rest watched the scene sweating with nerves, even Hades. After repairing the place and continuing the party with the unconscious newlywed couple, the guests began to leave the place, but not before leaving a gift for the married couple, who were caressed on the head by Riaz, who looked at them tenderly. Later Asia and Issei woke up, who embarrassedly apologized to his wife for the scene he made. Without knowing anything, he simply smiled at her and said that nothing was wrong, making Riaz and Issei blush. Days after, Issei was preparing himself along with Riaz's entourage and his family as they would go to Jotunheim for the events of King Utgarda to which Thor had challenged them. No doubt the brown-haired man was excited to attend, but he was also worried because he was now in the sights of many gods, and although he had the power to face several of them, there was also the fact that beings at the level of Indra and Office were out of his reach, so he hoped they would not participate, as it would be obvious that he would not win. He even doubted beating Thor, but he would not give up. Although Odin was certainly a threat to him, he knew that for the alliance, he would not do anything, even if the Norsemen had not joined yet. Finally Surzich's Lucifer arrived at the place with his wife, Surtur II and Saraerd Bale, who looked extremely excited because the event of King Utgarda would be something quite big and complicated apparently. For his part, Surtur II came with something in his hands as he headed towards Hyoudou Issei, who looked directly at the member of the Demon King Surzich's Lucifer's entourage. The orange-haired boy handed a small Viking ship to the brown-haired boy, who looked at it with intrigue. It's a Skadbladner, it's a gift for your wedding, boy, hahaha, enjoy it, he said in a jovial tone before putting his huge hand on Issei's head, staring at him. Take good care of little Riaz, I'll leave it to you, he said now in a serious tone. Issei simply nodded while Loki looked at the Skadbladner intently and then saw his son. Skadbladner, they were created by the same people who created Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, there aren't many in existence, explained Loki looking nostalgically at the small ship. I remember they sewed my mouth shut when those dwarves created it, along with Gunnar and Mjolnir, that thing is going to get gigantic. Really? The brown-haired boy asked somewhat incredulously. Yes, and besides, it will evolve according to the aura and magic of its master. What do you say, son? Shall we see what your aura can do? Loki asked in a playful voice typical of RL. Huh? Me? Issei said somewhat awkwardly but excitedly. Yes, my rook has decided to give it to you as a wedding gift, and for supporting my dear sister so much, we hope that it will be your first familiar, and that this will be a step to end the bad faith between us. Issei looked at the ship for a few moments before smiling. Well, let's do it, brother-in-law, he said somewhat excitedly while Riaz shook her head with a smile. Maybe his brother should forgive him since their engagement was arranged by their parents. Perfect, then let's clear the area a bit to perform the ritual, said the Mau. By the way, you'll need a name. A name? He murmured thoughtfully, before nodding. Okay, I already have one in mind, he said, barely able to contain his excitement. Say no more, brother-in-law, said Surzich's with some emotion, as it seems that he has been managing to gain his brother-in-law's acceptance. Then let's begin, the Mau indicated, while Loki generated the corresponding magic circle under Issei and the small ship. The demigod nodded before raising his hand towards the ship and channeling his magic, reciting, "I command you, you will become my familiar, the familiar of Hyoudou Issei, answer to this contract, Ryudomaru." In response, the circle beneath them shone brightly in gold, as did the newly christened ship. When the glow ceased, everyone could see the huge ship, as large as an ocean liner, floating majestically in the sky. Needless to say, Issei quickly began jumping around with a little boy in excitement. As expected of a demigod, he grew very quickly, as Issei commented, receiving a nod from many, though others were still surprised. "Did he grow like that because of me?" the brown-haired boy said excitedly. But of course, against someone with so much power, he would obviously grow brutally upon receiving his magic, the fallen one assured simply. "I confirm," Loki said in wonder as he looked at the back of his beloved son with pride. "And it's a good thing, because we'll be traveling in it," the Mayu intervened. "It's equipped with a system similar to that of the underworld trains, so you can use it to go to the underworld or to another place where it's registered, like Jotunheim in this case, or to where it doesn't require a permission, mainly to avoid causing misunderstandings with other factions," the Mayu said. Putting a hand on the brown-haired boy's shoulder and smiling. It's like that," the brown-haired boy muttered in an incredulous voice, but with palpable emotion. Of course, after all, there aren't many who would look favorably on a ship that leaves the dimensional gap without permission, explained Azazel. "Whatever, order him to take us on board, I can't wait to get on board, hahaha," the fallen one laughed with emotion. "Huh? Ah, right." Shaking off his surprise, Issei looked at the huge ship. "Ryudomaru, take us up." Instantly a circle appeared beneath the leaders and their companions, as well as the rest who became excited, disappearing a few moments later. Minutes later, the ship began to move through the skies, heading towards a dimensional gap that opened in front of it, bound for Jotunheim. Chapter 29. Ria's Gremory was sitting on her beloved fiancé's lap while feeding him a whipped cream puff in his mouth. There was still time before leaving the dimensional gap to reach Jotunheim. He looked at his cousin in the place who looked excited about the Ajarda games, and he didn't seem to be the only one as several on the ship seemed anxious to get to the event. Loki was one of them as he smiled in a way that was terrifying to some in the place. Jotunheim, Kingdom of Ajarda. An old Jotun saw the sky in which thunder rumbles with fury. Suddenly 3 impacts fall near him, showing a certain god accompanied by 2 other younger ones, one red-haired like his father and the other blonde, who had a very great resemblance to a certain actor who played his father in some movies of the mortals of Midgard. These were Thor, Magni and Modi, each holding their weapons. It must be said that Thor was no longer a chubby reed at all. After learning that Loki had freed himself from his chains, he decided that he would train with his 4 children for Ragnarok, which never came. For a long time he wondered why Loki did not attack with his children and Surtur Asgard starting Ragnarok, until he realized that he was allied with Hades, and to top it off, he had a son with the daughter of the god of the underworld. For a time the Norse were afraid because if Ragnarok started and they faced Hades' army, things would be very different. No doubt Asgard would fall, but when they found out that the Greek god joined the alliance of the Abrahamic factions, they calmed down a bit since they offered to join them as well, to which they left some conditions which some were denied by the Great Alliance, such as handing over Loki's head or his children. Thor refused to do so mainly because Loki was not the only one who participated in the death of his traitor brother Balder. He himself participated in the execution of the traitor by directly revealing the weakness of that one to Loki. On the other hand, Odin was the most foolish in this, since the old god was afraid of the grandson of Hades, especially after Freyja's premonition, which told him that Ragnarok would come no matter what. Thor considered it idiotic that they wanted to kill a young man who was not guilty of anything. It is true that he was the son of Loki, but he was also the grandson of Hades, and Hades would not be happy that his beloved grandson was killed. The truth is that Odin could not win a fight against Hades, and Asgard would fall even faster if Hades and his specters attacked alongside Loki's forces. Odin was afraid of such a scenario, but Thor knew that Loki did not want to lose more than he already has. The god of thunder observed the old Jotun who welcomed him before seeing the rainbow bridge descend to the ground, and from it in a flash of light came Odin accompanied by his Valkyrie, and a goddess whom Thor knew perfectly well, because she was treacherous, turned her back on Loki, earning the hatred of the god of thunder. Suddenly a little black-haired girl with a vacant look fell from the sky. She was accompanied by a silver-haired boy, a blonde boy with a sword that raised a hair on the back of everyone's neck, a Nekomata who was obviously mischievous, and a cute boy who reminded her of a certain mischievous and mocking Monkey King in her youth, who played a few pranks on her, along with Loki. He recognized them as they were the terrorists of the Cows Brigade, accompanied by their leader Office Ouroboros. Thor felt the presence of a dragon and a certain monkey which was coming on his back. Sun Wukong had come with Yulong. Thor simply decided to ignore them as he was more interested in the arrival of the large Gudbladner, which had the insignia of the underworld. The boy had arrived, and from the presences he felt he knew that the leaders of the alliance were coming with him along with his companions. A ship began to descend, and while everyone ignored Sun Wukong beating up Bhikkhu, they waited for the arrival of the leaders of the Biblical Alliance. Finally the ship was floating a meter above the ground while a gate opened and a wooden bridge slowly lowered from it, touching the ground. The first to come down was the leader of heaven, the Seraph Michael, accompanied by the trump card of heaven, Dulio Gesualdo, his ace, Shiddu Arena, and his second, Zenobia Quarta. The next to come down was the leader of Grigori Azazel, who was accompanied by one of the most powerful humans in the world/dog. Next was the leader of the demon Xerxes Lucifer, accompanied by his wife and queen Graphia Lucifuge, and his tower Surtur II, who felt somewhat uncomfortable under the fixed gaze of the leader god of the Nordics. Next was the god of deception and lies Loki, who was accompanied by his wife Miki Hyoudou, his daughter-in-law Asia Argento, his son Fenrir, and his grandchildren Skoll and Hati. After him came the leader of the underworld Hades, who was accompanied by his wives Persephone and Hanabira Hyoudou, while they were escorted by Rhadamanthys the wyvern. In the end, Hyoudou Issei was under him, who was watched closely by everyone, especially by Office and Odin, who watched him intensely. The young brown-haired heir of the underworld was accompanied by his faithful fiancés Rias Gremory, Akeno Himejima, and the entire Gremory entourage Miki Hyoudou, Taujo Kaneko, Vladi Gaspar, escorting the five-headed specters. Both Thor and the Hikari Uko walked towards the chestnut tree, although Office, Odin and Arthur Pendragon followed them closely. "I see you've come, brat. I admire your bravery in accepting my challenge at the Ajarda Games," then he motioned to his two sons who walked calmly towards them. "From what I see you are accompanied by your children Magni and Chris Hemsworth." An awkward silence fell over the place as Issei looked incredulously at the son of Thor and his father Loki on several occasions, children of the he fell silent as he saw his father arrive at the place. "Just because I look like Tom Hiddleston doesn't make me a son," Loki quickly replied. "We're friends, but nothing more." Issei looked at Modi who looked at him uncomfortably still holding his battle axe. "Okay, I admit it, I play Thor in the recent Avengers movie, but only as a stunt double," he said, making Issei relax, or that was until he saw a blonde goddess walk towards his father with a hurt look and full of regret, so he decided to give them space along with the rest, except for Odin and Miki Hyoudou who approached her. Husband sighed. Loki she was silent for a moment before looking into his eyes. "I miss you, love." "Love? You dare to call me that after betraying me," Loki said harshly. Sijin sighed for a moment to calm her pain before looking into his eyes again. "I'm so sorry, Loki, I wish you would give me the opportunity to mend the." A very loud and resounding slap was heard in the place, while the goddess ended up looking to the left due to the slap that Miki Hyoudou gave her. "Opportunity? Love? You feel the right to say such stupid things. Do you know how hurt and pained Loki came to my arms? No. You don't understand any of that. You don't care about killing your two children for it." Miki shouted in fury only to dodge a slap. "What do you know about that? You thieving, husband-stealing bitch, you took my Loki from me," Sijin shouted in fury. "Off like a Mexican novel," Issei mentioned mockingly before the incredulous gaze of the rest. "Hyoudou Issei, we meet again," Vali said seriously. Trying to look cool. "My rival," Issei said smiling. "Who knows? Maybe I'm close to equaling you or rather surpassing you," said Vali defiantly. "Sekiryu," said a childish and monotonous voice beside him making him feel chills. "I wanted to meet you," he said, looking at him closely. "The pleasure is mine, Office Ouroboros," he said, nervous because of Office's proximity, but especially because of the dead look Akeno was giving Office. "Who are the hooded men escorting you, Hyoudou Issei?" Vali said intrigued, ignoring Office. "Oh, they are my special squad or something like that. I honestly don't even remember their names." Hehehe, Issei laughed nervously at that before looking at Arthur. "I regret my behavior on my wedding day, young friend. I hope that doesn't affect our friendship," said the brown-haired boy bowing to his swordsman friend. "Don't worry, my famous friend, I would have reacted in the same way to such an intrusion," said Arthur, smiling kindly. "I appreciate your understanding and I hope to invite you again to my other two weddings with my beautiful fiancés. I will send you the invitation shortly," the brown-haired man thanked, smiling in the same way. "I will be looking forward to receiving them and to being at the aforementioned marital celebrations that my dear friend will celebrate with his fiancés," said Arthur, bowing. "Could you speak normally?" "I didn't understand anything you said Magni with his strange sword pointing at the pair. "Nobody here understood anything, you idiots," said the redeed. "You're the fool, Magni," Modi said regretfully before stopping his brother's sword with his battle axe. "Oh yeah, I forgot, guys, here it is," Issei said to the hooded men. One of them launched a spear of explosive light into the sky, leaving a light illuminating a specific place. Suddenly one of them jumped, throwing off his hood and revealing who he was. Issei almost attacked him. "Agmail," he shouted, raising one leg and stretching out his two arms holding them in place, while another jumped beside him taking off his hood, revealing another one of them. Anashik, he shouted as he stood sideways with his back turned with one arm slightly contracted and the other stretched out in the direction of Agmail. Another one of them jumped, revealing a girl. Halwarner, she said as she leaned to one side, stretching one of her arms up while the other contracted it, stretching one of her legs out from the strange formation. One more jumped, revealing a blonde with pigtails. Middle said this in the same way as Halwarner took the same pose, but on the opposite side. Finally the last of them jumped and fell on her back. Rainer, he shouted as he turned and crouched down, pointing his arms outstretched to the sides. And together we are the Rainer Special Forces, they all shouted at the same time, as a sort of flower aura surrounded them all, causing Issei to blush, only to see his father smiling mockingly. I told you not to let them watch Dragon Ball, the brown-haired boy shouted sadly. Chapter 30. Issei was really embarrassed because his father played a joke on him which didn't really bother him, but it did embarrass him, especially because of the mocking look of his rival Vali, the uncontrolled laughter of Biku, and especially the laughter of Riaz and Akeno, who laughed not at the presentation, but at the embarrassment that their beloved brown-haired boy felt. Or could see the young man's embarrassment only to notice the incredible divine auras clashing against each other ferociously. Miki Hyoudou was furious for her part, looking at Sijin with anger because she had declared that she would not give up and would find a way to regain Loki's love at any cost. I want to see how you do it, you will never be able to give Loki what I give him every day, said the brunette arrogantly. I will get it back, I know I will do it with my Aesir charms, I will do it, I already did it once, she said with confidence and arrogance. I assure you it won't be like that, he looked for me for 4 years, and when he realized that he was the father of my beautiful, fierce, charismatic, intelligent, powerful and loving son, he didn't hesitate for a second to accept him and recognize him as his own, taking him in his arms immediately, she said, proudly looking at her son with a smile. Narfi was 1,000 times better than that, Kaya, she screamed loudly as she was hit by a pair of fists. One covered in lightning and the other by the power of destruction, throwing it towards a mound of snow. Ara, what a weak goddess, said Akeno, surrounded by lightning. It seems that she is nothing more than just a cheap goddess, said Riaz, surrounded by the power of destruction. Both, since they began training with Hera, Hestia and Hela, had become really strong to the point that Akeno gained 3 new pairs of fallen angel wings, and Riaz had perfected her power of destruction to the point of creating an outfit made of pure energy of the power of destruction. She made the future emperors of lightning and destruction angry respectively, as Azazel laughed mockingly, partly proud because Akeno became a specialist in light and lightning. He should have been careful what he said about my brother-in-law, Surzicha said proudly as he watched his little sister's progress. Sijin just stood up to look them in the eyes. Don't get involved in adult matters, brats, and don't feel so special because they attacked me from behind, said the goddess with well-hidden anger. You're joking, it's obvious that my beloved daughters-in-law hurt you, you're lucky that Asia-chan didn't attack you, said my Hyoudou mockingly. What could a pregnant brat do to me? She said with doubt and some mockery before feeling several auras light up. I held back so as not to disintegrate you, don't push your luck, said Riaz furiously with her aura lit up. Looks like someone isn't learning, Akeno said with her lightning aura on. You dare threaten my daughter? Persephone said, turning on her divine aura at full power. Hades just looked at Sijin, he almost shit his pants. You want to die, Sijin. I won't stop the Sekiryuite if you want to die so much, Thor said, looking at the now black-haired man, looking at her with nothing more than the desire to kill her. Partner, should we kill her? I want to do it. Drake openly declared with contained fury. Foolish goddess, provoking a celestial dragon, said Vali seriously, is the same as crying out to die. She's stupid, Drake wants to kill her, Afa said without any emotion. Suddenly a magic circle appeared, emerging from the Seraphol accompanied by Sona Sitri and her entourage. Why so much tension? The demon queen asked. That's the goddess asking for her assured death, Seraphol, said Surzichas looking at her. Oh, she exclaimed before looking at Issei. Sekiryuite, I wanted to see you, I'm going to crush you in the competition, shouted the Mayu, who unknowingly calmed the waters before a possible massacre that could lead to a war between Asgard and the alliance of factions. The now back brown-haired man looked at her before narrowing his eyes. I accept the challenge, Mayu Leviathan, he said. Everyone's attention was taken by hearing a clap from the old Jordan, in which he looked at the rest. Let's go with King at Jordan now that all the guests have arrived, he said, taking the path towards the huge ice castle. Everyone followed him as tensions continued. Thor noticed his father's fixed gaze towards the younger brown-haired boy all this time, as well as the brown-haired boy's cautious glances, along with the feeling of distrust he had towards the one-eyed god. After walking for a while they finally arrived at the place where several Jordan looked defiantly at the guests. Finally they arrived at a kind of gigantic coliseum where a Jarda was waiting for them, and without further ado began the announcement. Now that our guests have arrived, the games will begin, shouted the giant before one of them took his mallet and smashed it to the ground. The great self will be the one to present to all of you the great games of Ijarda. First of all, it is totally forbidden to kill any participant or assistant in these games, he declared, while Ijardan passed by with a huge box in her hands and put it in front of the giant, who took out a paper. The first game will be decided by drawing a piece of paper from this box, and so on. The games will be decided, whether they are fights or competitions. Any attendee can participate if they wish. The fights will be to knock their opponent out of the arena, and registrations will be shortly for those who wish to participate. For the rest of the competitions, there will be free participation events, whether they are obstacle courses, food or drink competitions, lifts, and so on, said the ice giant excitedly, while everyone in the audience shouted with excitement. The Jotun returned the blade to the box before the giantess began to shake it vigorously, causing Odin, Azazel and Gasper to bleed from their noses when they saw her breasts bounce. Your girlfriends are going to kill you if they find out, Gasper-kun, said Kiba, blushing a little, looking discreetly at the bouncing breasts. Shut up, senpai, this embarrassed guy said. A sea of tits, said Azazel without shame. I agree with you, Brad, said Odin, watching without any shame the bouncing of those huge breasts. Issei for his part looked at Riaz, Akeno and Asia firmly before looking them in the eyes. These are better, he said, blushing at the girls. Wonderful move, son, said Loki, looking at his son and avoiding looking at the giantess under the intense gaze of his wife before she forced him to look. But look how that huge pair bounces, darling, they remind me of mine when I ride you at night, she said shamelessly, looking at Sijin with a triumphant smile, without noticing the blood coming out of Loki's nose. When the giantess realized that she had excited the men in the place and stopped moving the box, the giant took a piece of paper and unwrapped it, reading aloud. The game will be tug of war, a contest of strength between two teams, the Jotun declared with genuine emotion. Form two teams as soon as possible and show your strength. As an added bonus, you will use the Gleipnir as a rope, since the strength of the participants will be of divine proportions, the giant shouted with excitement, since these were the first games where members of other non-Nordic factions would participate, causing excitement and expectation in all the ice giants. On the one hand, some Jotun went to Loki and Issei's side to invite them to the competition, while others went to Vali and Biku's side, causing excitement in many. Saraerg decided to go next to Issei to participate, while Magni went next to Vali to participate with some excitement. On one side we have the most deceitful, lying, annoying and playful god, the god of lies and deceit, Loki. This caused a cry of excitement from the ice giants, because the one who was for them almost an entrepreneur of the Jotun was present. We also have the powerful, hot, scarlet and well-groomed Sekiruite, the audience shouted with excitement. Let's not leave aside our three participating brothers Viant, Anert and Alioi, the shouts intensified, increasing the excitement for the games and the competitive hunger. And last but not least we have the strong, humble and handsome demon Saraerg Baal. The screams of several giants did not take long to come as Saraerg smiled and greeted the audience. On this other side we have the descendant of the Monkey King who became Buddha, athletic, strong, fierce and very happy. Bhikkhu Wukong the aforementioned excitedly raised his staff while being applauded by the public. Also present is the son of a legend, he is red-haired, reminding us of the blood that runs in battle, strong, but above all capable of forming a legend of his own, the great and powerful Magni Thor's son, the audience shouted full of emotion at this point. Let's not forget these three giant brothers, rivals of the other three brothers who always fight to be the strongest trio, Ardov, Balak and Carson, he shouted once again, introducing them with excitement. Who wouldn't be excited at this point? Finally, the great rival, destined to fight to the death with the red, is the white, strong, determined, voracious, and who will steal your heart in a sigh, the incomparable Hikryuko Vali Lucifer. The public simply burst with emotion because the red and the white were about to compete. Without further ado, the participants stood in front of the Gleipnir chains, each taking one end of them. Without further ado, the great self can only say a few last words. Begin, the Jotun shouted loudly. The tremor, that's what hit the whole place as the ground split into pieces. The pressure was enormous, and the aura was crushing. Hades had covered Asia with a barrier to protect her from the hostile environment that formed in a moment. The thirst for victory was felt in the air as the shouts of excitement only grew louder and louder. Miki simply shouted her beloved husband's name with all her soul while holding a pair of pennants. Riaz and Akeno, for their part, shouted their fiancé's name with great enthusiasm. Meanwhile, several Jotun sang a single name in chorus. Loki, Loki, Loki. Come on, damn it, we can't lose for anything in the world, said Bhikkhu, pulling the rope with all his strength using Senjutsu and Taki to try to gain ground. What's wrong, Vali? Do you need the balance breaker? Issei said mockingly. If only Hyoudou, you're going to fall, the silver-haired man shouted as he applied more force. Stop talking and pull that damn chain, Magni shouted furiously, managing to start walking backwards. Saraerg simply smiled before being covered by his Taki, causing the opponent's advance to be lost. But just look at the strength of that demon, make me a son, shouted a Jotun, leaving her breasts exposed, causing a cry of euphoria from the audience and a perverted laugh from Azazel and Auden. Ah, come on brothers, we have to cover those other losers with mud, said Viant furiously. Loki, if you win tonight you get a prize of my life, said Miki, looking mockingly at Sijin. Ice, if you win tonight, there will be 3 of us, Rhea said in a low voice. 15. Then it happened. The ground shook violently, the hair left its normal color, the skin of father and son took on a bluish tone, the divine aura shot up with force. Saraerg, tonight I'll let you use Takikusha, Abaddon said in a low voice. At that moment Saraerg thought only one thing: respect for his opponents for putting up such a good fight, as he watched them fly away from the strength of Issei, Loki, and he even saw the 3 Jotun brothers who were on his team fly away. Saraerg was surrounded by a powerful aura of Taki next to Loki and Issei with the Gleipnir in his hands. This is unbelievable, but look at the Colossi we have here. The winners are the red team, announced the Jotun with excitement and euphoria. I won't be able to sleep tonight, Asia lamented. Chapter 31. The blonde boy stood in the courtyard of a large golden castle, he was sweating cold and had fear on his face. Unknowingly, he was being watched by a black-haired man who looked at him cautiously. The blonde sighed before looking up at the sky. I don't want to do it, but I don't want to die either, he said to no one in particular. He had heard an old rumor about the kingdom of Muspelheim, about a certain potion that granted immortality. He knew that he would die soon. The black-haired boy narrowed his eyes. He didn't trust the blonde boy, since he had been acting strange for a while without realizing it. They were both being watched by a black crow. The blonde now found himself in front of a kind of reddish shadow, which was hitting a huge sword with a hammer. To obtain that potion you must give me what I want so much. Bring me the copy of Thor's hammer, said the shadow without stopping hitting the huge sword. The blonde just nodded as his eyes turned reddish. The black-haired boy watched with a frown. Drip drip screams of incessant pain. The black-haired man was full of fury towards the one he called his best friend, who tried to save him and his son. The ungrateful man turned out to know everything and still did nothing. Love turned to hate and hate to pain. In the end, there was only emptiness as he watched her leave, leaving him alone and in constant agony. One last tremor and his chains broke, freeing him. He should destroy them, but far from it, he felt empty. His children looked for him when he did not go to prepare for the battle. He decided to go to Midgard, maybe mortals would have the solution to that pain and emptiness in him. He drank like a madman. I stole the mead he had in his hand. Then he saw her. Could mortals be so beautiful and full of wisdom? This was what mortals called love at first sight. He woke up next to her while a little boy was sleeping on his chest, already covered in drool. Asia lamented that she wouldn't sleep that night, while Kusha Abaddon smiled nervously as she remembered the last time Saraerg used Taki. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Miki Hyoudou ran into Loki's arms before kissing him deeply and looking into his eyes. Tonight, I'll wear that lace you like so much, she said, knowing Sijin was listening, causing her to approach annoyed. There have already been several provocations. The next contest is you against me, said the blonde with anger in her voice. I accept the challenge. I would like nothing more than to see you lose, said the brunette with a certain arrogance. Issei ignored all that as he hugged his 2 fiancés and his wife. You have no idea how much I love you 3, Issei said, placing a kiss on each one's lips, causing a small blush on each one. Kusha, I'll see you tonight in the room. I hope you're ready, Saraerg said without further ado, causing her to blush hard as she imagined herself in a nightgown and a bed full of different types of flowers. Oh yes, Saraerg was romantic when it came to intercourse, and she knew it better than anyone. The great me is excited about what we just experienced today in this historic moment, the Jotun shouted euphorically, before the giant shook the huge box again to the delight of several in the place. Be ready for the next big event that we will have in a moment. In the meantime, the registrations for the tournament are open. As soon as the next competition is over, the Jotun shouted before seeing how the giant finished shaking the box. He prepared to take out a wrapped paper. Let's see, the meeting will be a 1-kilometer race, he said before shouting very loudly, have the 8 competitors approach the track. After saying that, Miki Hyoudou and Sijin arrived at the track determined to win, however nothing prepared them for what followed. I hope you are ready to eat the dust, said a somewhat childish voice, being the Seraphol Leviathan. I'm sorry, but I don't plan on losing where speed is my greatest strength, said Kibayudo determinedly. They will eat the dust of foreigners, said a determined Jotun. My little brother will take me if I win, Fenrir said with determination. If I win, I'll ask out that hot demon who won the last event, said another Jotun excitedly. Will you be able to keep up with me? Said the voice of a brown-haired boy who smiled confidently. Miki Hyoudou swallowed because now the chances of first place were almost lost. The great me is excited for the next kilometer race, but I just realized that a kilometer is not enough, so it will be 10 in total for the excitement of the spectators, he announced, while several Jotun sang with excitement next to a drunk Azazel and a Surziches who was just starting to get drunk. Rafia looked at her husband badly because he went to drink with Azazel despite being a Mau. Sona rubbed her temples as she felt the headache she would get from her older sister's nonsense while avoiding going to skin Miki Hyoudou. For her part, Tsubaki encouraged Kiba from a distance while touching his belly. Hadi and Skol encouraged their father. Loki for his part shouted excitedly at Miki, even though he knew he would lose to the brown-haired boy on the track. It was obvious that everyone else would lose, but the question was, who would be second place? Odin looked intently at Issei as he pretended not to notice. Hades looked at his daughter resignedly because he knew that she would lose the chestnut on the track first. Thor and his children cheered Sijin on with excitement. Fenrir simply focused on running with all his might to at least reach second place. Seraphil was sweating nervously as she looked at the brown-haired boy. Of all the possible runners, it had to be him. They were really screwed. The office watched Issei intently while eating a cookie. How it got into her hands, I have no idea. But Jarda looked at everyone in the room with a genuine smile. He loved playing these games. He was already preparing the beer horn, and his star contestant for the eating competition was already ready as always. Issei sneaked a glance at Odin. He felt a chill, and the fact that his nightmares hadn't stopped gave him a clue. Well, the preparations are ready, the Jotun said with a smile before raising a cannon with one hand and lighting the fuse. When the cannon sounded, Sijin and Miki ran at a gigantic speed, but they were left behind by Miki Hyoudou, who was matched by Fenrir and Seraphil. The two Jotun were not far behind, and it did not take long for them to catch up with Miki and Sijin, who were trying to catch up with Seraphil, who was already being left behind by Fenrir and Kiba. At the start, a chestnut tree just looked at the track board. But what about the 8th contestant? Why don't you run? The Jotun presenter said to him from a distance. What's the point of winning if you don't give the others an advantage and hope? The brown-haired boy said mockingly while being encouraged by Reed. Bragging won't get you victory, the Jotun replied back. We'll see, he said in a rather playful tone. Miki decided to stop playing games and started running faster, leaving Sijin and Seraphil behind. New Loki, the blonde screamed as she saw the brunette leave her behind and even reaching Miki Hyoudou, who was behind Fenrir. Fenrir began to run faster, but no matter how fast he reached, Kiba was always behind him or at his side. First round completed out of 5, said the Jotun looking at the chestnut tree which was calmly eating an apple. I have to win, I'm going to show them how much I've trained with Issei, said Kiba, increasing speed. I'll get a compliment from my little brother, Fenrir shouted fiercely. Damn how those foreigners run, shouted one of the Jotun. If I lose, I won't be able to hook up with the demonic hot eye who played last game, the Jotun lamented. AI Sijin began to shout, managing to leave Seraphil behind. If I lose, Sonatan won't forgive me, Seraphil said, increasing her speed. If I win, I hope Loki gives me a prize. Miki laughed somewhat pervertedly. 4th lap completed. Boy, you should give up. You won't win even by a miracle, said the Jotun to the chestnut, who was barely getting into position to run. Miki cursed internally when he saw him. I'll never win like this, Kiba shouted before pushing his demonic power to maximum power. Oh sure, Kiba shouted before being surrounded by a powerful aura, leaving Fenrir and Miki behind too. Well, it's time to stop playing, said the brown-haired boy before starting to run. Several streaks of light passed at high speed next to Kiba, who just watched in disbelief as that brown-haired guy made 4 laps around the track in an instant. What the hell? Was the only thing he exclaimed. The 8th contestant wins the race, the Jotun announced in disbelief before seeing Kiba cross the finish line, followed by Fenrir, then Miki, then Seraphil arrived, then Sijin, and finally the two Jotun arrived in a tie. All the other 7 contestants threw themselves to the ground exhausted and shaken from running with all their might, only to be defeated in a second by the brown-haired boy who was not even fazed. By the way, who are you, champion? The Jotun asked before Reed hugged the brown-haired man. You won, Hermes, haha, good boy said nothing more and nothing less than. Thank you, Aunt Hestia, the Greek god smiled, smiling. It's not fair, Hermes, you're the fastest of the Greeks, said Miki, pouting annoyed. If he is faster, said Hermes somewhat arrogantly. Issei walked over and gave his mother a bottle of water. I see why your dates don't last that long, the younger brown-haired boy said mockingly. Several stifled their laughter except for Loki, who laughed foolishly. You watch a lot of cartoons for your age, Issei. Should I tell everyone about the time you wet your Hermes? Was silenced by Issei, who looked at him scared. You're right, it was very childish of me, Uncle Hermes, Issei laughed nervously. I thought so, laughed the Greek god, amused. Once again the ice giant approached before looking at everyone. The great me is eager for the next encounter. After this exciting race, he laughed thunderously before the Jotun returned with the box, to the delight of the males and some females present, beginning to shake the huge box again, while this time wearing a top that only made her breasts bounce harder. Loki, see how those breasts bounce, that's how mine will do tonight, Miki said in Loki's ear, causing a certain reaction in the former Norse god. Don't forget that you loved mine, especially when I let you play with them, said Sijin with annoyance. You two for the first time, the former Norse god didn't find the situation so funny, especially with the one-eyed bastard looking at his youngest son. Dare Odin and Ragnarok will really fall upon you. I know I'm not the only one who thinks that, he thought as he saw Hades staring at Odin discreetly. Look, Issei-san, I brought you a drink, Asia said with a tender look, handing her a bottle of energy drink. Issei couldn't help but take her by the wrist and with his other hand take her by the chin. I think a kiss from you would be the best for me, said the brown-haired boy before kissing her, leaving the blonde completely blushing. Asia said Ria's behind him before taking him by the shoulders. Ice is from the three, said the Redeed, before hugging the blonde along with Akeno. But tonight we will be his, said the Redeed, before the blonde released steam from her ears. Ara won't be able to keep up, Akeno said as she caressed the blonde's cheek. I don't know why, but seeing them like this turns me on, said Issei, literally on fire. Issei-san, you're on fire, Asia screamed scared. I'm surprised you're not used to it, Ria said with a nervous smile. When the Jotun finally stopped moving the box, the giant took a piece of paper and unwrapped it. The great self announces that the next contest is who devours the most. He shouted very loudly, making the place shake, causing a euphoric shout from the audience. Loki looked at his son, who nodded, confirming his suspicions. Father and son would face each other. Loki, I challenge you, old friend, shouted Thor, pointing at Loki with his hammer. I accept the challenge, Hammerhead, Loki replied as the audience grew excited. I dare you, Sekiruite Haidu, Issei, shouted Volley Lucifer, already in his balance breaker. I'm going to crush you, Hakuryuko Volley Lucifer, Issei shouted as his competitive instinct flared up. Oh, I'm hungry, said Asia looking at Rias and Akeno. Don't forget about me, Sekiruite, I will beat you. I Levi then Chan, said Seraphil, changing her clothes for those of a magical girl. Suddenly a really abrasive aura was felt in the place as a giant walked towards them. The temperature seemed to rise quite a bit, and for some reason they felt that perhaps this chubby giant would be a difficult rival to defeat. I hope you can fight, Kukuku was the only thing he said while laughing in a very sinister way. Well, the competitors have already been selected. From our brothers there is Loki the Ravenous. We also have the participation of Thor and Loki, a challenge from the two celestial dragons, the male Leviathan, and finally a pregnant human. Take care of yourself, girl, and if you feel bad, rest because the great self supports you, said the giant while everyone looked at Asia. I'm hungry, he said, touching his belly. Don't worry, Asia, eat until you are satisfied, said Issei, encouraging his wife, who smiled sweetly at him. Is it normal that I feel the need to inject myself with insulin? Volley asked Issei. Completely, he said, looking at Asia with a smile. Suddenly a giant arrived with a gigantic table and several dishes on it. Meanwhile, another giant looked at them defiantly while holding kitchen utensils in his hands. Contestants, come closer to the competition because everything is ready to begin. The great self gives you its support, but above all to the human girl. Go girl, the Jotun shouted with emotion. From his place, King Itjarda looked at them all with a sly smile. Let's see how long they last against Loki, was his thought as he watched them. Hades for his part looked at Odin fixedly, along with Persephone and the Issei squad. They didn't trust that one-eyed old man. Hades' teeth thundered loudly as his gaze turned hostile. The hatred was evident without a doubt. Ella from her place in the stands looked at Odin with deep hatred. But of all those who looked at the one-eyed old man, there were two who were looking at him with totally murderous intentions without him noticing. One gripped the handle of his battle axe tightly and the other took the hilt from his back. Ragnarok or not, they would kill Odin. They would never forgive him. They would never do it. Suddenly Surzich's Lucifer's tower felt a chill. The horrible one. The feeling of death lurking. The hammer rang loudly in a clash of metals as a huge figure smirked at his forge. It won't be long now, with a voice that would send a horrible chill down the spine of even the bravest person in the world. The enormous figure spoke, illuminated only by his forge as he continued hammering the enormous sword. Do an apostrophe to you believe it, Apollo? He said as he glanced at the Greek god. Of course I do, he said as another god put his hand on his shoulder, this one being nothing more visible. Ragnarok will soon come and fall upon the 9 kingdoms and even the other factions, he said as his command turned to that of a rotting skeleton. Avoid touching me with your rotten Aesir hands, said Apollo with displeasure. I want to destroy the Aesir and Vanir now, ha laughed a huge evil dark dragon. Your turn will come, Nidhugger, said the skeleton, revealing blonde hair with dry roots. Chapter 32. He saw her sitting drinking a simple beer. Sitting at the bar of that small bar in that remote and quiet town. She was beautiful in his eyes, perhaps the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. Those hazel eyes and those pink lips were so attractive, but there was melancholy in her gaze. She looked sad, so she was probably suffering in silence and came to this bar to drown her sorrows just like him. If you drown your sorrows in alcohol, he would never forget the enormous pain he felt. That horrible way she suffered, but above all seeing the one who was supposed to be the love of her life leave, after giving her 2 children to the Issei, her 2 poor children who had no fault, perished, one at the hands of Asgard and the other at the hands of her own brother, Vari. Narfi, her 2 beloved children dead so she could condemn him by chaining him with the entrails of one of them to 3 cursed stones, with a cursed snake that dripped poison, as if it were the saliva of a rabid rat. Damn Sigyn, damn Odin, damn Asgard. He wanted to destroy them, but the fact that his heart was so broken inside didn't allow him to move forward. That sadness was a burden for him, the pain of the loss of 2 of his children, and the fact that his own mother was the one who sold them just to save her own ass, was what made it worse. What he didn't understand at all was something that bothered him a little, or rather made him uncomfortable. Why couldn't he take his eyes off that brunette woman? What did she have that made her so different? He didn't know, so he made a decision while looking at his mead. Hey, he spoke to him in a somewhat shy tone. What the hell was wrong with him? Since when was he shy? He was always shameless. Do you want some of this drink? It's something you've surely never tried, something worthy of the gods themselves, he said, somewhat arrogant but embarrassed for some reason he didn't know. Wait a minute, don't tell me this is what mortals call love at first sight. No, it's surely something else. The god of lies deceived himself ironically. She looked at him cautiously for a few seconds before shrugging and nodding. She had graduated from Kuo University 2 days ago, so she would have a couple more months before she was forced to return to the underworld. Honestly, she didn't want to, because she was tired of her father always telling her what to do, and it's not like her relationship with Persephone was good, or with Macaria, who always looked at her in a contemptuous way. It was certainly horrible, and the only good thing there was her kind mother who, even with Persephone's indifferent treatment, always smiled sweetly. Damn, there had to be a limit to how pure a heart could be. He felt a presence beside him, a Norse god. What the hell was a northern god doing in the distant lands of the rising sun? Surely he was up to something. No, his gaze was full of sadness, although there was a small blush there. Surely he was like her, drinking to drown his sorrows in cheap alcohol that would later give them a horrible migraine. Hey, he said in a clumsy tone, is Loki really that drunk? Do you want some of this drink? It's something you've surely never tried, something worthy of the gods themselves, he said in a tone that seemed arrogant but shy. Okay, he probably didn't think much about this, she thought with a bit of grace. Sure, why not? She said without knowing that day her life would take a 180 degrees turn. He woke up in the morning and didn't see her. I imagined it. It was just a one-night thing. I guess it's time to start with the plans to bring Ragnarok to Asgard, thought Loki before bringing his hand to his head because of the terrible hangover he had. Damn, the only thing I hate about getting drunk is the hangover. Will she be the same? Forget it, Loki, concentrate on what's important, thought the Norse god again. He looked at the pillow next to him. That's where she slept after haha, and laughed pervertedly before hugging the pillow and smelling it. That beautiful aroma of hazelnuts and vanilla is going to drive me crazy, he thought before picking up a hair of hers that was left on the pillow. 4 years passed and he simply couldn't get her out of his head. Every time he tried to look for one of his children or try to plot any plan, she would come to his mind. It was like a curse that haunted him, and for some strange reason he loved that curse. He couldn't deny it anymore, he had gone crazy for her. He searched for her like a madman all over the world until one day his daughter contacted him, giving him just a few words that made him feel several emotions at once. I found the one you're looking for. Hades wants to see you, father. Are you a fool or what? Why did you mess with Hades' daughter? His daughter told him through a magic circle. Wait, Miki Hyoudou is the daughter of Hades, I scream at the top of my lungs. You took the virginity of a demigoddess and you didn't even realize it until now. Even for you that's too cool. What happened to the cunning god of lies and deceit? He must be you're in love. Hella laughed mockingly towards her blushing father. Okay, I admit it, yes, I am in love with Miki Hyoudou, Loki shouted at the top of his lungs. In the underworld, she looked at the photo she took of the black-haired boy while he was sleeping when she conceived her beloved son. Stupid, hexy Loki, she said, blushing before kissing the photo. What are you doing, mommy? A voice asked next to her, scaring her. She could only laugh shyly. Issei looked at Asia, who was holding her belly with a motherly smile, before her stomach growled a little, causing her to laugh nervously looking at her beloved husband. Loki smiled a little before feeling a hand on his shoulder. It was his wife who gave him a kiss on the cheek. Good luck, darling, she said before retreating to the stands. You're so lucky, old friend, said Thor, sitting next to him with a plate in front of him. Yes, I feel very lucky, he said in a loving sigh. I feel like I'm just here filling the space. Serafel said, feeling ignored by Issei and Loki. They are a couple of lovers, so let them be a little. I'm starting to think I should look for a partner, said Vali with a lost look. I'm starting to think the same, said Serafel, staring into space with a dead look. 11. Love does not fill the stomach, said Issei mockingly. Everyone at the big table turned to look at him. They had forgotten about him for a moment. "The great me wishes you luck, especially you human girl," he said with a smile before seeing a giant bring several plates of food. "Well, listen carefully that the great me is about to announce the rules of the game." Everyone fell silent. "The competition will end if you vomit, give up or the food runs out," he shouted with excitement. "The count will be by the number of dishes you have eaten. Our chef is eager to prepare his best dishes, so enjoy these dishes with your soul and good luck to the competitors." With that said, several plates full of food were served to all the participants. The smell of the food was schist. This would probably be the best food they had ever tasted in their lives. "Start now," shouted the Jotun, and just then Asia, Issei, Loki, Vali, Thor and Seraphol began to devour their dishes in a hurry. A knock was made on the table, and 4 participants shouted at the same time, "More please," these being Issei, Asia and Thor. They were immediately served their dishes, which were devoured at an insane speed. Miki watched her daughter-in-law eat, although she did it very quickly with manners. For a second she remembered her pregnancy and a smile came to her face. Those days were beautiful but full of fear for her father. Riaz watched Asia and Issei eat hastily, a few seconds ahead of that giant called Issei. Seriously, since Asia reached her second trimester, her appetite became incredibly voracious. I suppose that being a human with the soul of a goddess and pregnant with a god forces her to eat huge amounts of food, the retard thought. The Kendo for her part laughed a little. However, she looked at the small basket she had brought. "It's a pity I wanted her to eat the bento I prepared," the brunette thought with slight sadness before wanting to laugh, seeing Seraphol get up and vomit. It seems she only lasted 20 dishes, she thought with irony, considering that Asia and Issei were carrying twice as much and kept eating. Hiroka watched Vali devour his dishes more and more slowly. It seemed like he was getting full, but his pride wouldn't let him give up. Biku couldn't help but laugh out loud as he watched Vali fall on his back and vomit to the side while looking like he was crying in frustration. "Damn it, Hyoudou, what do you and your wife have for stomachs? Black holes," the silver-haired man thought after eating 138 plates of food. Issei felt annoyed because that pair was surpassing him by very little, but in the end they finished only a couple of seconds before him, which was making him desperate. Thor couldn't help but laugh at Loki as he watched him get up and go to vomit before feeling the food come back up his throat. Loki, while vomiting, started laughing at Thor. That pair ate 195 and 204 dishes, being left far behind the first 3 places, with 367 Asia and Issei each and 364 Issei, who was frustrated. Suddenly a last plate was left on the table, being taken by Issei. "It looks like we have a winner if he manages to devour that last plate," the Jotun presenter shouted excitedly. Issei looked at Issei, who looked at him upset for having lost. Then he saw her little eyes showed longing for the last set. Issei took his fork and bathed the meat in that special sauce, and without a moment's hesitation, he gave his beloved wife a bite before the astonished gaze of all those present. Riaz looked at Issei's actions with longing and approval. The Kendo blushed at the beautiful gesture as she thought about feeding Issei the same way. Issei looked on in disbelief as that brat gave up glory and victory. The presenter shouted excitedly. His preference for Asia was evident. Finally Issei finished giving the last bite to Asia, who held her belly for a moment to smile happily. "Thank you very much, Ice. I'm full, haha," she laughed in a very tender way, which caused Issei to give her a kiss on the lips. "For my loves," whatever she said, also thinking of Riaz and Akeno, who would feel happy at what the brown-haired boy had said. Both of them wondered internally if their pregnancies would be like that. "The winner is Asia Hyoudou. I knew you would win, girl. I never doubted you," shouted the presenter quite happily. "Why are you giving up on an assured victory, brat? You had victory in your hand," shouted angrily Issei, who felt humiliated at losing to that pair. "Because there are things in this life more important than winning a silly competition. My family is my priority," said Issei as he walked away with Asia, who looked satisfied. Issei noticed the basket that Akeno had in her hands, noticing what it was. "I prepared a bento for you, but I don't think you're hungry," Akeno said somewhat sadly, but was surprised to see Issei devouring the bentos in the basket like a maniac. He certainly couldn't help but smile. Issei spoke in an incomprehensible manner before swallowing loudly without noticing it jarred his attentive gaze. "Ah, that was delicious. Do you have more?" Issei asked, while everyone looked at him incredulously. I didn't have time to be more greedy," she said, hugging him and then kissing him. "I should have known that not even that would satisfy him," she thought ironically. Muspelheim Surtur's Forge. Finally the giant stopped hitting the hammer before looking at the 4 guys in the room. "Apollo, Nidhugger, Balder, Thrym," said the fire giant before turning to look at them. "It is time for Ragnarok to begin." Chapter 33. The place was in chaos, and the fire consumed too many bodies and old homes. In his desperation he ran as best he could to a specific place. Horrified, she saw her beloved husband lying on the ground covered in blood. At his side the corpse of a god. In the distance the corpse of that giant of fire. At his side a spear held by a sword and an axe. Her golden hair moved with the warm wind of the place. His eyes became moist as his throat ached. She was crying while screaming and holding the body of her beloved husband. Fate had been very cruel. He left her a miracle of life itself, a product of her love for him, but in exchange. Issei Asia screamed with all her soul while crying bitterly. Asia remembered the nightmare she had this morning with bitterness before burying her face in her beloved brown-haired boy's chest with concern. He, not knowing what was happening, just caressed his beloved wife's hair. That Jarda had been watching the competition for some time this year had undoubtedly been the best of all. Foreigners from all over the 9 kingdoms, and even from the outer kingdoms came to compete. Demon kings, dragons, Greek gods, Aesir, and Ekamata, Sun Wukong and his descendant, a Surtur clone, humans. This competition had it all. I watch as the Who Drinks More competition began. Thor Odinson, Issei Hyoudou, Vali Lucifer, Bhikkhu Wukong and surprisingly Ardor Pendragon participated. That Jarda was quite observant with his guests. He observed Odin's slight, almost imperceptible murderous instinct towards Loki's son, Hades' gaze that had never left Odin for even a second, and the hatred behind those eyes. Miki Hyoudou and Loki's discreet look towards Odin. The jaws of Fenrir, Garm, Hati, Skoll and Cerberus eager to tear Odin apart. Hela's gaze towards the Norse god. The silent and murderous gaze of Surzich's Lucifer. Azazel's cautious and hate-filled gaze. Many wanted Odin dead on the spot. The desperation in Seraphal's eyes for every competition she lost. It was kind of funny to see her throw a tantrum every time she lost and cast an ice spell into the distance. But what surprised him was the hatred and desire to kill of 3 of the Aesir towards another in particular. The Jarda smiled a little, but her gaze was above all focused on the brown amber eyes. That boy was a complete mystery. Thor was the first to start drinking. Most of them shouted with joy and delight as they watched the Norse god drink non-stop until he removed the large horn of beer from his mouth, shaking his head angrily once again. The participant Thor has drank 3/4 of the horn this time. He has beaten his own personal record. Shouted the Jotun presenter who looked to be in great joy as he introduced this year's games. No doubt he was enjoying this as much as the rest of the Jotun. Next was the boy named Vali Lucifer. That boy had struggled to keep up with the brown-haired boy, but he always beat him. Even so, he noticed that far from frustration, there was a determined look. The silver-haired boy had taken on the challenge of beating the brown-haired boy in one way or another, but in a clean way according to his own eyes. The participant Vali Lucifer has achieved to drink 2/3 of the horn, surpassing Thor's record. Will someone be able to drink the whole horn this year? The presenter said again in excitement. No doubt Jarda saw how every participant after Vali could not surpass that mark, but as always there was an exception. Participant Hyoudou Issei has drunk the whole horn. This is amazing. We have a champion in this competition for the first time in millennia. The excitement was palpable, the audience was euphoric, and that was saying something. That Jarda looked on in disbelief. For him it was simply impossible for someone to win that competition. The fact that Thor drank 3/4 of the horn was impressive, and that the descendant of the original Lucifer drank 2/3 impressed him greatly, but the fact that the brown-haired brat drank the entire horn was something he did not expect to happen. Unintentionally a smile crept across his lips. After the shock and the enormous degree of euphoria in the stands, the next game continued. There was a huge cat lying down and sleeping comfortably. The Great Self gives the next challenge to whoever wants to participate. Lift this gigantic cat, he shouted with euphoria, while several Jotun approached along with Vali Lucifer, Bhikkhu Wukong, Saraerd Baal, Thor Odinson, Hyoudou Issei, Seraphol Leviathan and Miki Hyoudou. One of the giants grabbed one of the legs first, using all his strength to lift the leg a centimeter, before falling to his knees in defeat. Another one followed, managing to lift the cat's paw 5 centimeters before fainting. One by one the Jotun were only able to lift the cat's paw a little when it was Bhikkhu's turn, managing to lift the paw 10 centimeters before letting it fall exhausted. He was soon Seraphol, managing 20 centimeters before getting tired, but that did not stop him from jumping for joy at having managed to lift his leg a little more than the rest. Next it was Miki Hyoudu's turn, who surprisingly managed to lift her leg 50 centimeters before letting it fall, making the place shake, before looking at her husband and winking at him with a flirtatious smile. Then it was Vali Lucifer's turn, who surprisingly managed to lift the whole egg with his arms for a minute before letting it fall and smiling smugly. He was certainly satisfied, but it was clear that he wanted more. Then it was Thor's turn, who surprisingly raised the front of the cat with a monumental effort, giving a war cry. Then Issei followed, leaving Jarda shocked again by lifting the cat completely for 10 seconds, leaving everyone speechless with the impression, setting a new record and naming him the champion in the competition. It's a pity that the demigod's pleasure will last little when he sees with his eyes wide open Saraerd Baal raising the cat over his head, screaming loudly for 30 seconds, leaving the demon as the new champion. That Jarda had to admit that the demon of the Bale house impressed him too much, that physical strength was enormous and very close to that of Hercules or Atlas himself. Without a doubt the young demon had a bright future ahead of him. After that, the last game before the tournament followed. A very simple game to tell the truth. The game that made Hades raise his eyebrow instead. The game that made Hell look closely. The game that Thor could never improve on no matter how much he participated. The hardest game of all but with the simplest rules. The game that Jarda knew no one would ever win. Absolutely no one would ever win. Moving a fragile and delicate old woman with a black hood covering her face. The weak and delicate old woman arrived slowly but surely. An old woman who everyone felt like an old friend. An old woman who gave a cold but not bad feeling. An old woman who could never be moved by anyone. Finally the last match comes and for the participants there is only one rule: move this poor old woman from the place. The method doesn't matter, everything is valid at this moment, there are no other rules, shouted the presenter. Issei narrowed his eyes because he didn't like the idea that absolutely everything was valid at all. The first to participate was Seraphol, who first tried in a good way but didn't move the old woman. She began to try to push her, but couldn't move her at all. She tried with magic but couldn't achieve anything. He used his best arsenal of demonic magic, but again he was completely unsuccessful. Even with his most powerful technique he did absolutely nothing. I end up crying in Sona Citri's arms, helpless for not being able to move the old woman. Next was Biku Wukong, who confidently took the old woman by the arm and pulled her hard. He achieved nothing. He used his staff, he failed again. He used his Taki at full power, but failed again. No matter what I did, I failed. She ended up crying in the arms of her ancestor, who looked at the old woman with a mischievous smile knowing the truth. It was Vali Lucifer's turn to launch himself directly into his balance breaker, achieving nothing. I used divide, but I can't divide anything. I used half dimension, but again it had no effect. He uses his juggernaut drive and uses the long Ina smasher, but he doesn't achieve anything again. Vali ended up exhausted, lying face down with an incredulous look. Sarah remained the favorite of many. I achieved nothing. Then it was Miki Hyoudou. Nothing again. Loki. Nothing. Thor using his Mjolnir. Absolutely nothing. Odin using a lot of his power. Nothing. Hestia using her fire of Olympus. Nothing. Hades tried, he didn't achieve anything, leaving him bewildered. Agni tried and failed. Mahdi also failing miserably. Several Jotun tried and failed, causing Seraphol and Biku to rejoice, they didn't feel so miserable now. He tried office, he failed, to the complete bewilderment of Jarda, who threw a tantrum for the first time in millennia. Jarda looked at the young brown-haired boy who had been looking at the old woman for a while. It seemed that he would also participate in that competition. He tried to hide his mocking smile as best as possible. Issei walked before the attentive gaze of everyone, but especially the worried one of Asia. She was very afraid since she remembered the nightmare of that morning, and she didn't even want them to go, but Issei managed to convince her to come. Finally the chestnut stood face to face with the old woman, who for the first time turned her gaze to the person in front of her. Issei tried to take her by the shoulder. The old woman stumbled backwards with an incredulous look suddenly filled with anger. The place was truly silent. I did it, someone finally did it, we have a champion in this challenge of King Jarda, the Jotun announcer shouted before watching the original Sun Wukong drop his staff in utter disbelief. Any mocking smile, he had disappeared. Is something wrong, old man? Biku asked, surprised. Impossible, he said, stunned and unable to believe it. Biku looked at him even more strangely. Why does the old man look so scared? The Yaokai thought. Jarda looked at the brown-haired boy even more incredulously before standing up, causing all the commotion and whispers to stop. Young god, you have surprised me, he said in a joking tone. I have tried to deceive you. He stopped in front of the chestnut tree, staring at him fixedly. With my magic, I changed everything with great power. I faced you, listen to me, and I will explain, he said seriously. You were more voracious than fire, you drank the entire sea. That cat over there is your Munjender, he said, causing everyone to be stunned, and the old woman is death. This made everyone freeze. Asia did not feel calm at all, on the contrary, she felt more afraid than ever, and now she regretted not having tried to convince the brown-haired boy not to come. Odin looked seriously at the brunette. But suddenly everyone in the place felt their bodies paralyzed with fear. Their bodies screamed danger. Their skin suddenly stood on end. And then they heard it. The trumpet sounded loudly in the place. Loki looked in disbelief at nowhere in particular. The cat transformed into Jormungandr, waking up and looking at his waiting father. Fenrir was very surprised next to Hela, who looked incredulously at her father. Thor didn't understand what was happening because Loki was clearly here. Odin smiled. Hades narrowed his eyes as the trumpet of the Norse apocalypse. The horn of Heimdall had been blown. Chapter 34. Everyone was stunned. Loki felt Thor's incredulous gaze as he denied that this was happening because he knew that his old friend Loki was not seeking that revenge against Asgard. Xerxes was puzzled because Loki is supposed to be the one who starts Ragnarok, but he himself is there with a stunned expression. Issei looked bewildered towards the horizon right towards the lower branches of Yggdrasil right where Asgard would be located, and he managed to see armies advancing towards that area. He looked at Jarda totally bewildered, and then looked at his father and Thor, who looked at each other in bewilderment. What's wrong? It was the simple question Asia asked that made them all react. That's what I ask you, Loki Odin shouted, raising his spear against the god who was about to stand on guard when Thor put his Mjolnir right in front of Gunnar. What does this mean, Thor? Odin said coldly. He is not the cause of this, father, that is clear, Thor said seriously. I agree with your son Odin, Loki is not the culprit, Hades said seriously, drawing everyone's attention. Asgard is being attacked by Surtur, I can feel it from here, damn it, Hades growled angrily, knowing that Surtur was in existence on par if not superior to his father, so he knew that this would be a very difficult battle. From the sky of Jotunheim a giant image began to appear as Xerxes' tower looked at the being on which its existence was based. Although your mere existence is an insult to me, more than anything for being a vile servant of a disgusting demon, I will give you the opportunity to come to my side, copy of me, come to me, and I will receive you as a son, Surtur II, Surtur said from the sky, looking at Xerxes' tower which won everyone's gaze, but Xerxes hardened his gaze towards him. My loyalty is with Xerxes Sama, I prefer death to joining you, shouted Xerxes' tower. The price you will pay, you scout, Loki, due to your lack of interest in Ragnarok. I investigated what was the reason for it, makes me sick that you would revoke like a vile pig with that Greek girl, Surtur mentioned with venom in his voice. Before the angry gaze of Surtur, Hades, Issei, Loki, Thor and Miki Hyoudou, dirty hybrid brat, your destiny is already sealed. I see your imminent death. There are several who wish you death, and one of them you know in particular, Surtur finished before the image was deleted. Heimdall the Bifrost now, Odin shouted as he was wrapped in the rainbow bridge and taken away from there. Damn you, I'm going to kill you, Issei said furiously before looking at the sky. Ryudomaru take Asia, Riaz, Akeno, my grandmother Hanabira, Shuri-san, Lefei-san and Sona Citri, along with their entourage to the deck and protect them at all costs, Issei said to be suddenly enveloped in his armor. Xerxes did not hesitate to prepare to go into combat with his tower. Bali looked at his rival before accessing his balance breaker as well. Sun Wukong looked at his grandson before looking at Yu Long, who was ready to leave the place. Ella looked at Fenrir, who began to grow until he was the size of a mountain, just like Skoll and Hati, who were only slightly smaller in size. Sigyn looked at Loki before being enveloped by the light of the rainbow bridge. Seraphol prepared for combat, with her sister safe inside Ryudomaru she could fight more calmly. Saraerg prepared himself in the same way as he said goodbye to his beloved before being sent by a magic circle to the underworld by force and looking at his pawn who transformed into Regulus Nemia, surprising some in the place and more when entering balance breaker. Miki Hyoudou prepared herself in the same way, her spectre armor appearing, looking at her husband who was staring at Thor. Just like old times, Loki the god of thunder smiled slightly. Just like old times, my friend, he said before his armor appeared with a pair of golden horns. We are ready, father, said Magni next to Madi. Issei Sama, we will follow you into battle, said Agmail, along with Raynor, Donashik, Middle and Kalwarner. Raynor special forces are here, said Raynor herself as her spectre armor glowed brightly. Suddenly a huge tremor was felt in the place, caused by Jormungandr, who looked directly at Thor. I never thought in my craziest dreams that we would fight on the same side, Thor. Then he looked at Issei. Look how your big brother fights, little Issei, I would have liked to meet you in another situation, said the Midgard serpent. Same here, brother, I would have liked to meet you in another situation, Issei said smiling under the armor. It will be an honor to fight by your side until the end, my good friend, said Arthur Pendragon to Issei. The honor is all mine, my dear friend, said the brown-haired boy before everyone in the place left at high speed, leaving office there. I'll go see, he said monotonously looking at Jarda. How troublesome all this is, said Jarda before looking at the stadium. It's a shame the tournament couldn't start because of Ragnarok, he said resignedly, knowing that it was very likely that they would all lose. It was well known that Surtur, the closer to destroying Asgard, the stronger and more powerful he would be. Probably tonight the 9 realms and the outer realms will burn, he said. Referring to the realms of the other mythological pantheons. Fates of Asgard. Heimdall watched the Einherjar and Valkyries fight for survival only to die in vain. He knew this was the end of the world. I notice Odin and Sigyn at his side, who was affected by this. Defend the entrance with your life, Heimdall, Odin said coldly before retreating with Sigyn to Valhalla. Heimdall looked into the distance taking his sword, only to see his old rival arrive with many more beings from different mythologies. Thor. I watch with regret and slight emotion as the ice and fire giants fight the Valkyries and Einherjar. He raised his hammer before bringing it down on several giants. Suddenly he felt a sword coming towards his head, so he deflected it to the side with his hammer, only to be stunned. Is something wrong? Did you see a ghost or? A blonde-haired man said with a smile, with a mocking smile on the living half of his face and an apathetic one on his dead side. Malika Thor said seriously before the undead dark elf smiled. The same, he said mockingly before emanating an aura full of resentment and death wishes. Let's bring the Ragnarok, Thor, he shouted before launching into combat. Thor simply hit the sword with his hammer, making Malekith retreat only to dodge a magical attack, while from several magic circles came out wizards and demons of the ancient demon kings, along with a silver-haired man who smiled playfully. But just look at who I find, it's Thor Odinson, said the man, while Thor evaded Malekith's thrusts and magical attacks. Who are you, demon? Xerxes will execute you for treason, said the god of thunder only to notice the demon's disgusted face. That bastard snatched her from me, Grafia, he shouted in anger before taking a breath and smiling. By the way, Rizavam sends his regards. He smiled again before creating a giant magic circle, releasing dark creatures similar to magical beasts, but with an evil appearance before retreating himself, managing to avoid Mjolnir, which almost blew his head off. So Klipith already made his first move, said the dark elf before one of these creatures tried to attack him, bucking traitors, he spat angrily. I have no time to waste, damn it. Thor charged his hammer with force towards the sky, filling the entire sky with thunder. Die, the god shouted before lowering his hammer, letting lightning fall from the sky of Asgard towards all of his enemies and evil beasts. Malekith managed to evade the attack only to see the world spin out of control and feel his hair being pulled, then he realized that Madi had decapitated him. Don't stay with all the fun, father, said Madi before cutting another of the beasts with her sword. Thor did not respond as he saw Surtur in the center of Asgard raising his sword, only to be struck by a powerful beam of energy, causing a colossal destructive shockwave. Loki. Loki reached the entrance to Asgard before evading a sword he knew perfectly well. Heimdall, he said seriously. Loki, this is the last day of your misdeeds, said the guardian god before charging with his sword, trying to split Loki in half. You don't understand, idiot, I'm on his side, Loki said angrily, repelling the attack with his own sword. That's where you're wrong, Loki, Heimdall smiled darkly before launching himself back into combat. You, Loki just said before getting serious and attacking with fury, you, he shouted with anger, quickly understanding everything and attacking with anger and resentment towards Heimdall. Heimdall began to laugh, repelling Loki's furious attack. What's wrong, Loki? Any lies discovered? He said, smiling mockingly. Loki was repelled before noticing Heimdall's divine aura increasing, surpassing his own. It's your end, Loki, just as it was Narfi and Vari's, Heimdall shouted before his smile faded and he began to sweat. Behind Loki a kind of constellation began to form which was the cause of Heimdall's fear. It can't be, that's Lokabrena, said Heimdall naming the Nordic constellation before noticing something. Maybe it's you, he said with fear. It is what you fear, Heimdall, Loki said with hatred before a dark armor attached to his Nordic armor and his golden horns turned dark, his skin turned dark blue and his eyes black as the night itself. One of the new specters of Hades, he said seriously, before raising his hand in the direction of the Nordic god Vedringr. Heimdall felt his whole world twist around him and all consciousness was lost only to hear a rumble in the distance and feel someone collide with him. Loki felt a hand on his back after seeing the god Apollo collide with Heimdall while he was inside his technique, taking him out of it but leaving the god disoriented. He looked behind him seeing his beloved wife Miki Hyoudou smiling sweetly at him before getting serious watching Apollo get up. This will not stay like this, bastards, he said before fleeing in a magic circle in a cowardly manner, avoiding a double stab from the Hyoudou couple. Heimdall once came out of his daze, felt pain in his chest as he watched a pair of leaves pass through his body. With his last strength he looked at the couple before his eyes lost their light in the face of Loki's last attack. Loptra, he said before a kind of fishing net in the form of energy surrounded Heimdall and closed on him, ending his existence before the eyes of the couple. Miki was about to talk to her husband until they were surprised by a powerful shockwave coming from the center of Asgard. Ollie. Lately he was frustrated because his destined rival was far superior to him, and although he had closed the gap quite a bit there was still a lot to do, but that same thing only motivated him to grow and become stronger. Issei had become his goal to surpass. Suddenly he sensed danger behind him, so he dodged a demonic attack behind him before feeling his blood boil in anger. Right behind him was a silver-haired man who recognized him because this was his main objective to destroy. Aren't you going to come and kiss your grandfather, Vali, or is it that you still haven't stopped giving blowjobs to your beloved Sekirute, said the silver-haired man with a smug smile. You damn, Vali said angrily, staring at him. If I am the same, he said, knowing that his grandson would be more upset. You will wonder what I am doing here. No, a stupid question coming from you is not news, because it is obvious, he said before taking the head of an evil dragon which attacked him, but he only held it without much effort. Don't you see that I am talking to my disgusting grandson Nidhogger, he said before throwing him as if nothing happened towards the dream and sending him away towards the walls of Asgard. Soon it will all be over, Volley. Choose your priorities well, Brad, he said petulantly before seeing Nidhogger take flight against both of them. I leave it to you as homework, he said before retreating into a magic circle. Damn Rizavim, Nidhogger shouted before charging towards Volley, who successfully evaded him. I'm going to kill you instead and then devour those stupid Issei, the beast growled. Volley, who was really upset by his grandfather's not so unexpected visit, looked at the evil dragon before smiling darkly. He already had someone to take out his frustrations on. You're ready, Albion? I'm ready, Volley, answered the celestial dragon before the silver-haired man launched himself towards the evil dragon with fury, managing to hit it in the snout and then take flight. Divide resonated in the place. Let's see how long you can last, bastard, Volley said, still upset by the short conversation with Rizavim. Freya. She looked at the sky terrified because her future vision about Ragnarok and the arrival of Surtur was real, and she could do nothing to avoid it. She watched in terror as the sword of the fire giant Surtur was brandished above her head before charging with force towards the ground. Just before closing her eyes, she saw a beam of scarlet energy and Esmeralda collide with the sword, making her retreat along with the giant, who hardened his gaze. Son of Loki, you dare to get in my way, damn hybrid, Surtur shouted with anger, looking at the brown-haired boy who smiled playfully. I'm his son. What did you expect? He said while Freya looked at the young man in front of her. So he was that flash at the end of my vision, thought the fertility goddess with slight apprehension. You're ready, Drag, said the brown-haired boy before closing the helmet of his armor. I was born ready, mate, said the dragon before Surtur took his sword from the ground of Asgard and glared at them. The chestnut just laughed a little before getting serious. Boost resounded in the place. Freya would remember this battle for the rest of her existence. He would remember the terror he experienced that day. Chapter 35. Sarah looked at the ice giant harshly while he was in his balance breaker. The giant just looked at him with disdain, as if he were just a cockroach. A demon without demonic power trying to act tough while fighting the king of the ice giants. Trim, it even seems like a bad joke, Brady said with sarcasm and venom in his voice. Sarah just looked at him intently before smiling slightly, not letting the giant's words affect him. This caused the giant to become enraged, and he threw a punch towards him, stopping the blow with one arm. This will be very fast, believe me when I tell you, it's going to hurt, Sarah said before punching him, sending the giant flying towards one of the walls of the Great Wall of Asgard. The giant simply could not respond anymore, he could not resist and fell apart into pieces, implying that this was his end. Well, that was disappointing, Sarah exclaimed before avoiding the attack of more giants now made of fire. Forget what I said, this is just beginning, only this time I will put more back on it, he said mockingly, while Regulus Nemia only let out a laugh at the occurrence of his friend and bear. But Arthur. The blonde-haired youth looked at the dead fire and ice giants around him with disdain. Maybe he just had higher expectations than he really expected, or that was before he evaded the treacherous attack of a demon from the Chaos Brigade. I don't need to know more. It was obvious that they were betrayed by Klepeth. Rizavim had already made clear on one occasion his contempt for Volley. Arthur found himself surrounded on all sides by Klepeth demons, so he raised Caliber into the sky before grinning and loudly shouting Caliber. Then a massive beam of holy energy arose into the heavens, wiping out the Klepeth demons from existence. The blonde watched as an undead Issei flew split in half towards him with wounds all over his body. Humming from the same direction at high speed was Miki Hyoudou with his sword in hand, looking at the undead Issei before noticing how he was regenerating. Damn it, Kiba exclaimed with annoyance, this is the 8th time I've split you in half, he said coldly. A hand, my dear fellow swordsman, said Arthur with a smile. It would be an honor, said Kiba smiling in the same way. Before they could advance towards the undead Issei, he was crushed by the body of the badly wounded Nidhogger. They turned to Volley, who looked at Nidhogger with slight mockery. It seems the Klepeth is not as powerful a threat as I thought, said the silver-haired man looking at Nidhogger before the undead Issei came out from under him. Volley just looked at the undead with doubt before looking at Arthur and Kiba, who were staring at him. Is that thing yours? He said, pointing at the undead, who glared at him at being called a thing. If Volley, hell, you're not even in the Juggernaut drive and you're already wiping the floor with Nidhogger, said Arthur with irony. When you have as a rival the possibly most powerful demigod, you tend to look for ways to be stronger, said Volley. If I understand you, Issei-kun is a difficult rival to reach, said Kiba with enthusiasm. That's why I don't plan on staying behind, he exclaimed firmly. Volley smiled slightly. It seems that the list of rivals was increasing. Everyone stopped talking as they were almost sent flying by the impact of a strong shock wave. The undead watched as Surtur was sent 2 steps back by whatever had hit him, dropping his sword to the ground of Asgard before watching him pick it up again. "Wow, my rival doesn't waste time, it's time for me to stop doing it too," he said before rising into the air half-dimension, exclaimed Albion before the space where the evil dragon and the undead were was reduced, slowly crushing them. Kibba looked at Arthur before nodding. "Sliff annihilation," he said with a serious tone of voice. "Caliber," Arthur said before launching himself towards the enemy followed by Kibba and Volley. With Gasper. The little vampire watched the enormous hydra in front of him with determination, launching himself at it while stopping time just before one of the beast's 8 heads headed towards him. The training with Nai-chan was not in vain, "I will prove my worth here," and now he thought with determination before he began to be surrounded by more beasts coming towards him. He gave a war cry before drinking a small vial of blood. His eyes shone brightly in a blood red as he felt his muscles begin to contract and increase in mass, causing a feeling of ecstasy and euphoria in him. He simply looked at his enemies before saying a couple of words, "balance breaker." But that said, her already elongated nails which looked like claws were surrounded by a dark mist forming even darker claws, while the same dark mist surrounded her torso as a form of protection, while her delicate androgynous features began to look more masculine, while her size increased to easily the same height as Kibba, while her clothes were torn leaving the mist as the only thing that did not let her apparent nakedness be seen. The magic circle descended from his feet to his head, leaving him dressed in a wine-colored jacket and black dress pants, while his hair was combed back, showing his forehead with a closed third eye. Finally his eyes showed as sacred gear as appendages of darkness surrounded him, and creatures made of the same darkness came out of his shadow. "Forbidden Baylor view balance breaker," Baylor's drive, Gasper mentioned in a more mature voice before opening his forehead eye, launching a beam of energy that incinerated the hydra from half of its body, before time began to resume causing the beast to let out a howl of pain, before falling to the ground lifeless by the multiple creatures that absorbed its blood, while around it, all the beasts were vast. "If I hadn't known you before and had seen you in the female academy uniform, you would scare me, Gasper-kun," said a voice coming from behind him. He turned back to see his senpai and training partner for a couple of months. "Saji senpai," said the vampire with a smile, although due to her transformation, she looked somewhat gloomy. The Citri clan demon just nodded before letting out a whistle as he saw all the corpses around Gasper. "To think that you were such a nervous wreck before and seeing what you've become with sensei's training makes me wonder how far I've come," said Saji with a genuine smile before they both heard several divides and a huge explosion. "Wow, if I'm not mistaken that was Volley, wasn't it?" he exclaimed in shock. "Yes, I also feel Hyoudou-senpai's presence in the place," he said before seeing the body of an undead fly in his direction, grabbing him by the neck. After that, a dragon corpse fell on the spot, broken into several pieces. "Let go of me, monster," exclaimed the undead to Gasper, who threw him toward Saji, who received him with a kick to the chin, raising him in the air, only to see a sword stab into the skull of the undead, making him vanish into particles, ending his existence. "Wow, Gasper, sometimes I forget how cool you look in your balance breaker," said the blonde demon with a smile. Gasper just smiled. "Yes, but you've seen yourself in your subspecies of balance breaker, that armor and that sword should be called a trap," Saji exclaimed with slight mockery. "Says the guy who transforms into a dragon king." Gasper and Kibba exclaimed at the same time with a flat look. He only managed to blush with shame. "That's true, my other half, our complete form is not a game," Vitra managed to say mockingly in her mind. "Anyway, are we supporting Hyoudou?" Volley was interrupted when everyone was thrown into the air by a powerful shockwave that came from the impact of a large block of ice and a mass of the power of destruction on Surtur, who advanced several meters backwards. But Issei minutes before. The brown-haired boy looked at Surtur seriously before raising his arm and launching a dragon shoot at close range, only causing a small explosion that didn't even bother the primordial fire, who just looked at him before launching a punch that was impossible for the brown-haired boy to dodge, throwing him into the walls of Asgard before raising his sword from the ground. Issei returned at full speed, giving a war cry and throwing a powerful punch, unbalancing the enormous enemy he faced. However, the primordial fire only swept him out of the way with a slap, throwing him into a building, leaving him in front of some Asgardian children and a beautiful silver-haired Valkyrie who had been protecting them. Surtur sent a flame towards the chestnut tree to burn it alive, along with Issei and the Valkyrie, causing it and the children to scream. The brown-haired boy raised his arms before giving a powerful war cry and creating a barrier with his divine power, managing to protect everyone in the building. "That damn guy, he's only interested in burning the 9 kingdoms," thought the chestnut will go. "If we only had a few seconds you could access that form," although it cost, Drake mentioned before falling silent as a huge fireball headed towards them again. "Drake impulses now," shouted the brown-haired man while reinforcing the barrier, but the fireball was repeated by a barrier of ice. Celsius cross-trigger, a dangerous person shouted loudly, causing a drop in temperature in the abyssal place, managing to extinguish the fireball before a pillar of ice hit the primordial, and then was hit by an enormous attack of the power of destruction. Nai-san, Issei exclaimed in surprise upon seeing Surziches arrive with his wife. He just gave him a smile of recognition before staring at Surtur seriously. For his part, the primordial began to advance towards the pair of demons seriously, before being attacked by a gigantic wolf which bit his right arm, leaving it useless. Issei looked at his older brother ripping off Surtur's arm before jumping back as Skoll and Hadi lightly damaged his legs. "Damn mangy wolf, I will enjoy cutting off your head and the ones of your." Surtur was interrupted by Jormungender's tail whip that made him turn his face in pain before being thrown to the other side by Cerberus and Garm, who bit him in different parts, injuring him a little more before having to cover himself from an attack by Hades's Bident, who suddenly appeared at his side, injuring him in his right shoulder. Issei watched all this with a smile before getting serious. "Greg, it's time to use that form. I know it's imperfect and it will leave me weak for a few days, but I can't stay like this. Will the others do all the work?" the brown-haired man told him seriously before closing his eyes. "You know that you can always count on my support, comrade." Issei looked forward, spreading his arms as he was covered by his grandfather, his brother-in-law Surziches, and his sister-in-law Grafia. "Whatever you have in mind, we will buy time," Surziches mentioned seriously before he began to be surrounded by the power of destruction. "Thank you, Nai-san," Issei said before looking at Grafia, who gave him a slight smile for the first time since she met him. "Same to you, Anuit," that brought a genuine smile to Grafia, who surrounded herself with more demonic power, ready to cover him as she used whatever she had planned. Without further ado, Issei spread his arms out to the sides, closing his eyes. "I am the one who will ascend," he began his song. "It has started, it's going to start." The voices of the previous wearers of the boosted gear were heard, while a large aura surrounded the brown-haired boy. Surziches launched an attack of the power of destruction which hit Surtur in what remained of his right arm, leaving him with a bleeding stump and causing his sword to fall to the ground of Asgard, while Grafia attacked with giant ice spears, sticking them into the primordial's feet. "I am the red dragon that transcended the principles of domination. An irrevocable promise, a priceless oath," the previous wearers repeated again as the armor acquired a pair of shoulder cannons and a pair of mechanical wings with thrusters. Hades stabbed one of Surtur's eyes, while Loki and Miki Hyoudou launched a couple of attacks destroying the primordial's eye, leaving him one-eyed. "As far as infinity, I will surpass the dream. What the world awaits, what the world longs for," the previous wearers sang again before the armor gained a pair of horns on its head just like Loki's, while black marks ran across the entire armor. Surtur felt a stab in his belly coming from his sword which was being used by his clone. He finally became enraged, regenerating his wounds except for his right arm and throwing everyone away. "I will become the Emperor of Darkness and Illusion. It's for salvation, it's for love." The armor began to look more robust, while the aura surrounding it was black, gold and scarlet, causing a huge tremor throughout Asgard, stopping some fights. "I will take you to the depths of the Crimson Tartarus. You chose the path to true domination," exclaimed Drake with excitement as the cuffs of the armor increased in thickness. "Divine Ascension, Juggernaut Overdrive," Issei shouted before a monumental amount of aura erupted at the scene. Surtur looked at everything helplessly because the blows he received were serious, and in order to heal his wounds, he lost a lot of his power, but it was not for nothing that he continued to be a primordial. Issei seemed to move at a strange speed as he left his silhouette moving slowly, while several blows appeared on Surtur's body, before giving him a couple of kicks to the head, making him retreat. "This ends now, Brad," he exclaimed in Surtur anger before putting his hands together, creating a sphere of primordial fire and compressing it into energy and throwing it towards Issei. "Ultra Dragon Blaster," Issei shouted as a huge amount of energy came out of his cannons, which collided with Surtur's energy beam, creating a shockwave as each of the energy beams tried to gain passage to the other. A female scream was heard in the distance until a golden beam hit the Surtur beam. Everyone looked in disbelief at Ryudomaru firing the golden beam while being surrounded by emerald-colored divine aura. "Ice Winds," Asia shouted from inside Ryudomaru as her now golden hair floated in the air. Hades looked at this before smiling. "She got her divine awakening. She's no longer a mortal, my dear daughter-in-law," he thought with a smile before supporting and launching a full-power divine attack against Surtur. Surziches in his true form began to charge a full-power attack, managing to gain more ground in the attack now together with everyone, but was surprised to see a second attack of the power of destruction coming from Ryudomaru. At the top of Ryudomaru was Rias, wearing a kind of scarlet red dress made of the power of destruction and a pair of horns of the power of destruction protruding from her head. She launched a third attack of the power of destruction with her hand before falling on her back, unconscious, in Persephone's arms. What nobody expected was to see a Longuna Smasher arrive from the sky by volley. "Now hide you," shouted the silver-haired man. Surtur felt himself slowly beginning to lose ground, shouting in anger and cursing. Issei with a last effort shouted loudly. Boost 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 boost. Damn Sekiryuite, Surtur shouted before being evaporated by the energy beam, leaving a trail of destruction and incandescent ground. Issei sighed before losing his armor, falling to the ground only to be caught by Fenrir. Everyone else was exhausted, so they fell to the ground exhausted. Issei managed to get up by leaning on Fenrir, only to see Odin slowly approaching. "You're amazing, boy," the father of all began as Fenrir felt his own fur bristle and began to growl. Issei felt fatigue and his words choked in his throat, realizing that he couldn't move due to the backlash of his transformation and ultimate technique. That strength and power are not easy to achieve, not to mention your own feats. I mean being more voracious than fire, stronger than Thor, drinking the entire sea. She laughed sarcastically before looking at him with a smile that sent shivers down the brunette's spine. Hades tried to get up, but exhaustion did not let him. While Loki and Miki tried by all possible means to stand up, the anguish on their faces was noticeable. "After all, you were the one who stopped him." He stopped abruptly before raising Gunnar and pointing it at Issei, much to his fear Ragna. Suddenly Odin felt fear like he had never felt before because someone held his arm firmly. "Sir, not telling anyone about prophetic dreams about your death is in bad taste." Issei gulped as Odin felt a hand rest on his shoulder, causing him terror as it felt extremely cold. "Through hypnos, I guess someone will have Spartan training," Thanato said with a serious look. "Although I would like to kill you and torture your old dirty soul, you piece of shit old man, we will leave that pleasure to whoever most wants to do it and who kindly asked us for that pleasure," Hypno said seriously, throwing Odin back away from Issei. The old god raised his spear pointing at Issei before hearing a scream filled with anger. Odin Aridid shouted, cutting off the god's right arm before a blonde cut off his left arm, dropping Gunnar. "I Father," Thor shouted before smashing Odin's head into the ground with his Mjolnir. Everyone was stunned before Thor looked at Loki, and that was for manipulating Balder, he said with a satisfied smile as Issei fell unconscious. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.